And with that, has everyone had a chance to check audio, make sure they can be heard? Good.
So,
Very good. Well, noting that the time is 5:31 p.m. on this, bear with me, the 63rd anniversary of the founding of Motown Records, the 83rd anniversary of the establishment of Timely Comics, which later became Marvel Comics, an anniversary my parents regret to their everlasting concern, and also, most importantly, the 90th anniversary, which probably still, it ought to be a lot earlier, but there it is, of the election of Hattie Caraway, Democrat of Arkansas, as the first woman elected to the U.S. Senate. With that, I'll call this meeting to order. Welcome, fellow commissioners and members of the public joining us for the special meeting of the County of San Diego's Independent Redistricting Commission. I will note that we are joined today and come full circle with Andrew Potter, the county's clerk of the Board of Supervisors, who will be serving tonight as IRC clerk. Andrew, again, welcome back. Let me now ask you to provide some more information about today's meeting.
Thank you, Chair Boehm. I appreciate the opportunity to be back with the commission, and it's all great to see all of you. At this time, I'll invite any members of the public who wish to provide oral testimony during today's meeting to please review the instructions posted on the redistricting website at www.drawyourcommunity.com. We ask that all individuals who wish to speak submit an online request to speak form in advance for planning purposes. However, all requests from the public made at today's meeting will be honored regardless of whether you have submitted an advance request. Agendas, minutes, and supporting materials for the Commission's meetings are posted on the redistricting website, including instructions to request translation. Meeting agendas are translated into Spanish, Vietnamese, Chinese, Tagalog, Arabic, Japanese, Korean, Laotian as required by law. The log of correspondence received has been updated and provided to commissioners and is posted on the IRC website. Correspondence received is posted on the website with today's meeting materials, and the Commission's log of ex parte communications has been updated on the IRC website. Also note for the record that we received, staff, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 e-comments for today's meeting that were distributed to the Commission and posted online.
Thank you very much, Andrew. We turn to the next item on the agenda, the roll call. Andrew, could you please call the roll?
Thank you. Before I call the roll, I would like to note for the record that commissioners are participating via teleconference. As such, all votes will be handled by a roll call vote. I'll ask commissioners to please unmute your microphone and say here or present when called upon. Chair Boehm.
Here.
Vice Chair Caterina.
here.
Co-Vice Chair Garcia.
Here.
Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Chen.
Here.
Commissioner Diaz.
Here.
Commissioner Dostal.
Here.
Commissioner Hanson.
Here.
Commissioner Inman.
Here.
Commissioner Krugliak.
Here.
Commissioner Larson.
Here.
Commissioner Pons.
Here.
Commissioner Russ.
Here.
Commissioner Servin. And Commissioner Servin is absent.
So thank you, Andrew. We now turn to item 3, discussion and possible approval of a resolution authorizing continuance of teleconference public meetings. This item allows for the continued simplified method for virtual participation by commissioners at IRC meetings. We are considering this item now before our current resolution expires on January 14th with the prospect of one more meeting in January. Andrew, are there any requests from the public to speak on this agenda item?
There are no requests to speak on this item, Chair Boehm.
Thank you very much. Sorry. So bear with me as I read the formal title for the motion. Do we have a motion, though, for approval of the resolution of the County of San Diego Independent Redistricting Commission authorizing continuance of teleconference public meetings pursuant to Government Code Section 54953 as included with the agenda materials?
So moved. Second.
Second by Commissioner Brown. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Seeing none, Andrew, would you please call the roll for a vote?
Thank you. Again, we'll be using the randomizer for the vote. So listen as your name is called. Co-Vice Chair Garcia.
Aye.
Commissioner Pons,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Servin is absent. Commissioner Russ,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Dostal,
Aye.
Commissioner Larson,
Aye.
Commissioner Krugliak,
Aye.
Commissioner Diaz,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown,
Aye.
Co-Vice Chair Katarina,
Aye.
Chair Bame,
Aye.
and Commissioner Inman.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously with all commissioners who are present voting aye.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And let me just add a warm welcome to the commissioners that I didn't have a chance to greet before they joined, but glad you're here. And also just note for commissioners that for technical reasons, we weren't able to have minutes from our last meeting to approve today. So we'll be approving 2 sets of minutes at that second meeting that we're talking about in January. More to follow on that. We'll now move to item 4, a discussion and possible approval of technical changes to the 2021 redistricting plan and final report adjusting the boundaries of the supervisorial districts for the County of San Diego Board of Supervisors, and consideration of possible authorization for the IRC officers, that is the chair and the co-vice chairs, to communicate any approval of these technical changes to the County of San Diego Registrar of Voters. Today's agenda packet included a presentation and materials describing the proposed changes, but as always, those written presentation and materials are not nearly as interesting as hearing from the SPOC for these matters, Commissioner Ken Inman. Ken, please, the floor is yours.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, okay, great. So I guess, okay, so you've got it up here on the screen. So essentially, you've got the materials, and these are recommendations, minor technical adjustments that we received from various parties after the final 2021 plan was approved back in December. So we call these technical adjustments, and in the documents, we'll go through the adjustments that we've received, as well as talk about the rules that we're using to make these adjustments. And the adjustments that we received came from the Sycuan tribal nation or tribal government, as well as the registrar of voter. So if you want to go ahead and move on to the next slide here, this lays out the rules that we're going to use for evaluating these adjustments. And so the first one is essentially we're only going to move 2020 census blocks, complete blocks. So we're not going to be splitting any blocks or anything smaller than a block to be moved. The second one is it has to be a block with no population. Again, we want to not to have any impact on the approved counts and distributions that were already laid out in the 2021 final plan. And any adjustment must not change the intent of the plan as adopted. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see the first request, and this is the one that came from the Sycuan tribal government. And in the final plan that was adopted, the Sycuan reservation was split, and you'll see outlined here in kind of that greenish. I'm not good at naming colors, but anyway, what's outlined there are the blocks that are parts of the reservation that are actually in District 4, whereas most of the reservation outlined in orange is clearly in District 2. And so the request was to make the Sycuan reservation whole, along with all the other tribal governments that are in District 2. And this involves moving 4 blocks. You can see the list of blocks there. All the blocks have 0 population, and it would result in the Sycuan reservation being whole within District 2. The move would split Rancho San Diego census designated place. The boundary here, the purple boundary for District 4 right now is following the Rancho San Diego census designated place. And so by taking these blocks out, you'll have a slight split of that census designated place. But again, there's no population involved. And so do you want me to just go straight through all of these? Or if you have questions, I suppose it maybe is best to ask them now. You might forget. I don't know. How do you want to handle that, David?
Yeah, Ken, I tend to agree because there's a series of these to go through, but this one in particular was frankly a deciding factor in not exercising the authority the commission delegated to the officers at our last meeting because of the sensitivities and complexities. So with the commission's permission and making sure there's no procedural problem, I'll ask commissioners to raise their hand or speak up while we're going through these changes to ask any questions they have at this point. Commissioner Russ.
Yeah, Ken, why, if there's no population change, why does this matter?
Well, that's why my answer is that's why we're making the move, because it's inconsequential to the overall plan, but it does have the impact that it makes the reservation whole. So it's a move that we can implement, doesn't adversely affect the plan as approved, and it makes the Sequan reservation whole. So I don't know if.
Okay, so someone could move into that area. Is that what a possibility?
It doesn't look like it. This one area, the part that kind of looks like has the handle going up at the top.
Yeah.
The bottom part of that has some structures on it that are community facilities, like it's a community college or something like that. The other ones are
heritage center as well, that the tri pointed out. And these are the kinds of technical changes that frankly, if we had the time that we had requested to consider this as we move towards final maps, I think it probably would have come up in the normal course of business. But because of the sensitivities and importance of tribal lands and the commission's position during previous meetings regarding keeping tribal areas whole, this seemed a change worth offering, particularly because it met with the standard, as Ken mentioned, of zero population.
No, I can understand that. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Was there another hand? Commissioner Larson?
Yeah, I just to better understand it, I know that Rancho San Diego is in District 4, the new District 4. Was it that the parts of the Seishan Reservation were actually in the Rancho San Diego area, in the area that we call Rancho San Diego?
That's correct. Yeah, the census drew the boundaries for this to define Rancho San Diego as a census designated place. And the way the census drew those boundaries, it divided the reservation. So we were using census geographies to define this, and that just happened to split the reservation. So that's true.
Yeah, Ken, just to even better understand it, who sets up the census definitions? Who makes the census blocks?
That's a good question, and we talked about that when we were meeting on this. And what actually happens is I'll do my best job. I don't have facial hair like Alex did, but if you go back several years before, several years prior to conducting the census, and even starting right now, the census is collecting information from local jurisdictions about where they should be drawing boundaries and trying to make sure that the boundaries and the geographies they create don't conflict with local geographies that counties or other jurisdictions might be creating. There's a lot of work to try to resolve all those issues. Clearly, here's one that wasn't properly resolved, I would say, but needs to be brought to the attention of the census. And we'll see that as we go through these, actually, there are a few more of these oddball things where you think, well, why did the census draw that geography that way? And the answer is, well, we don't really know why they did it that way, but it's clearly something that somebody should bring to their attention and actually have them resolve prior to the 2030 census when they conduct.
Okay, well, got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Commissioner Larson, thank you for that, because while I didn't submit a lesson learned on that, I have every intention of making that part of our discussion for further action. So thank you, and Commissioner Russ. Any other comments or questions on this particular adjustment or four-block adjustment? Okay, Commissioner Newman, please continue.
Okay, go on to the next slide then, please. And this is one that we didn't recommend, and the reason is because it's splitting a census block. So this is from the registrar of voter, and the purple line on the map is where they would want to draw the boundary so that it preserves voter precincts. The red lines on this map are the voter precincts. But if you look right there by the number 1, that represents District 1, there's that little notch that sticks up there. And the black dashed line is the census block boundary. And so the precinct line, or the line that they would like to use, the register of voters would like us to use, is cutting off that little notch up there. Again, it's kind of a weird shape for this census block, given all the others, but that's the way census drew it, and we were following census geographies. And we can't do this because we have no way to split off. And it actually splits more than just that one block. If you look where it jogs into District 4 and comes straight down, again, that's splitting another census block. So this one actually splits several different census blocks, and they all actually have population as well. So that's why this is not recommended as one to move forward on.
And who requested that, Ken?
This is the registrar of voter requested this to try to preserve their precincts. So right now, the problem that the registrar of voter has is when they generate ballots, they have to generate those ballots based on what district somebody lives in for supervisorial elections. And so what they're concerned about is potentially having neighbors that, will be getting potentially different ballots but they're still within the same precinct. So it causes problems for the register of voters. Either they would have to change precinct lines, or they would have to make judgment calls about where this address actually belongs, because our boundaries actually are putting certain parcels in different districts here. And we're splitting precincts. From their point of view, I guess we're splitting precincts. From our point of view, they're splitting blocks. So,
Commissioner
does
Russ?
that answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, and it kind of raised one. Ken, is this a case where my next door neighbor could actually have a different ballot than I? I mean, the way that we've drawn it, whereas the purple dash line would preclude that. However, it would move people. There would be people numbers that would be moved. Is that correct?
Well, there's always cases where your neighbor could be in a different district and precinct from you, and so get a different ballot. So
Okay.
we're not trying to remove that. That's always going to be the case. People, live next to each other, but they draw lines in various places. What is going on here is there's an existing precinct that our district boundaries are splitting.
Mhm.
So that's causing the registrar to have to make decisions here about what ballots to send to people,
I see.
or how to redraw their precinct boundaries
And-
potentially.
Okay, and the reason you're not recommending this is because it moves numbers, is that right? It moves people, is that right?
This one potentially could, but we don't really know, because all we know is the population of a census block. So there's that block that's right there, where the number 1 is.
Right.
And let's see, that red number is a precinct number. I guess I don't see the census block number on this map, but the black dash lines would outline the census block there. And so maybe that census block has, I don't know, 100 people or something. We don't know where within that census block the people live. So if we were to subdivide that census block, we wouldn't know how to parcel out that population.
Yeah, okay, all right, no, I got it. Mhm.
Okay, not seeing any other questions? Go ahead.
Okay, on to the next one. And so this is one where, again, the purple line is this is the registrar of voters. All the rest of these are going to be from the registrar of voters. And the purple line follows their precinct boundaries. And you can see it's kind of moving around back and forth. The black dash lines are the census blocks. Again, this one is splitting census blocks. And, we wouldn't really know where the population is here because when you split census blocks, you don't know how to allocate it. So the reason here again is because their line splits census blocks. And so we can't really build that into the plan. So that's going to be the reason for all of these being not recommended. Essentially, as we go through, it's going to be the same thing. They're splitting census blocks. So do you want to go on to the next one, or?
Yeah, I think we'll just, first, Commissioner Russ, that's a leftover hand that's up, right? Yeah. Just want to make sure.
And no, that's exactly right. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, and just because I can't see all commissioners at once, just to keep things moving along, I'll ask Ken if you can just pause after each slide. We'll give commissioners a chance to please speak up and say, I have a question or I'd like to ask something, and we can give you the floor at that point rather than go through hand raising, which will take a few more minutes. So seeing none, not hearing any, Ken, please proceed.
Okay, let's go to the next. And this is one that we're actually recommending. And so this is, you can see here we're at a junction of districts 4, 1, and 2. And you can see that little purple triangle up there is actually connected. There's a connector that connects that triangle, that purple triangle, to District 2, but it's kind of dangling out there. It really doesn't make sense to have it connected to District 2, and it makes much more sense to move it to District 1 if possible. The purple line again here is the recommendation from the registrar of voter. And we can respect this because that triangle actually is a whole census block and its population is 0. So this is a move that we would recommend making because we're moving one census block. You can see the number there, and it involves no population. And this one also doesn't make any changes to the splits table. That's that table at the end of the PDF where we list all the communities of interest and other county jurisdictions as to whether they're being split or not by district boundaries.
Commissioner Pons?
You're muted.
Muted.
Try it again. Is there any infrastructure in that block that's being proposed to be moved that could impact either District 4, 2, or 1?
I don't know the answer.
And the reason I say that because a lot of the discussion was about people, but it was also about issues concerning infrastructure and services associated with the infrastructure. And so I understand the issue of people and population, but there were also concerns raised during the public hearings about infrastructure and services. Can we get that information, or is that relevant to this discussion?
Well, we can get it. The quickest way to do that is to look at a satellite map of this area. And I couldn't do that. Well, potentially, I couldn't do that right here in this meeting, but we can definitely do that, get a satellite image and see exactly what's in this geography. But we do know there's no population there.
Yeah, I understand. I think it may be beneficial just to understand that because it may come up later, and I just want to be able to answer the question in anticipation of the question.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely do that.
Question, Ken?
Yeah.
Do we know why it had this weird shape? Is there why it was drawn this way? It seems unusual.
It is unusual, and I think it's probably because some of the rules that we were using to try to keep other geographies whole. So there is probably some part of another jurisdiction or geography that we were looking at that caught a corner of this and moved it into District 2. I think this is one, though, that with more attention would have been switched around. I don't think, if you look at it from a mapping standpoint, it just simply doesn't belong there.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next slide. Again, this is one that we recommend doing because There is no population involved here, and the recommended change from the Register of Voters actually corresponds with census block boundaries. And so you can see that we would be moving that part from that census block that's currently in District 2 into District 1. So all the area underneath the purple dashed line would then be moved into District 1. And this also doesn't have any impact on the splits tables in the document. So there's no really, other than changing empty square miles of area. Well, it's probably not even a square mile, but at any rate, other than changing land, there's no population or jurisdictions that are involved in this move.
Yeah, my comment remains the same for this recommendation as it did to the previous one.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, go on to the next one. This one, again, the purple line shows what the Register of Voters is recommending. And this, just to reference things, this is actually out by the Sequan Indian Reservation. So if you just go north of this a little bit, the top of this, the top of the image is where we're making those changes for the Sequan Indian Reservation. So it's just south of that area. But if you look at the line, the Register of Voters has drawn, again, we're cutting across census blocks, and the census blocks are following the black dashed line in here. And so again, the recommendation is not to make this one because it's splitting census blocks. Okay, move on to the next one then. This one is also splitting a census block. The census block kind of starts down at the bottom while you're following a census block boundary. They're just south of the purple line. That's the black dashed line. And the census block extends up above the purple line. So this kind of goes right through the middle of that portion of a census block in this case. And so we're recommending not to make this. And again, just as a point of reference, this is an area that's just south of Sierra Mesa is where this one is occurring.
Yeah, and this would involve moving people if we did accept that. Is that correct, Ken? Yeah.
Yeah, this one, that census block is actually fairly large, and there's non-zero population involved. Yes, definitely. Okay, moving on to the next one. This is out by, if you know where the Miramar National Cemetery is, and the intersection here, or the point of the purple dashed line right there is the intersection of 805 and Miramar. Out there, right at the intersection where Miramar goes over the 805. And what we're looking at is moving, 4 census blocks that border Miramar and the 805 and are right along the Miramar National Cemetery. These 4 census blocks were originally included in District 3 because they're part of a community planning district, the university community planning area. But that community planning area kind of takes a weird line through the National Cemetery here. And so, that's why they were initially in District 3, but we're proposing to move those 4 census blocks into District 2. And what happens when you do that is now we're going to be splitting the university community planning area, but there's no population, it's only land area. And this would then unite kind of this area that's the cemetery. So there's no population out there in these areas, actually.
Well, no living population, Ken.
Yeah, well, I was waiting for somebody to say that. I wasn't going to do it.
You knew it. You knew it'd be me.
Yes, Jack, thank you. So again, and actually this one, Frank, there's nothing built out there at all. I know that there's lots of biking trails out there. I ride around on this in my mountain bike actually. And so I don't want them to build anything out there. Any other questions? Okay, go on to the next one, please. So this is one of the weird census geographies. This one's kind of strange. So you can see that little point there that actually goes into a cul-de-sac. And it, why the census drew their census block like that, it's a mystery to me. It's a mystery to Flo that, just doesn't make any sense. So again, this is something that I would imagine, that the county or some jurisdiction would raise with census saying you need to change the shape of this block because it just doesn't make sense given the way people are populating this area. So the proposed change in the boundary from the registrar of voters is the purple line, and it's cutting off the top of that extension of the census block, which is pulling District 3 into District 2. But we can't do that because again, it splits the census block. Obviously, this one would involve population because you can see there are parcels there. Those are where houses are built in this case along that cul-de-sac. And so it would actually involve changes in population count as well. So that's why we're not recommending making this because of the split in census blocks. And just for reference, this is just north of the Black Mountain open space, actually, is where this is at.
Commissioner Diaz and then Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I understand the importance of not splitting census blocks, but in this case, it seems like we would want these households to stay together within that precinct. It would just make a whole lot of more sense. And it doesn't look like it would be a significant population change. So that's my only comment for that. So is there a way we could make an exception for this?
We don't have a way right now to do that because our process is to provide the county with a list of census blocks that define a supervisorial district. So there would have to be some sort of change in the rule that we use to draw these districts so that it's not just simply defined by census blocks. One way to do it potentially is to use census blocks and parcels. You could use the county defined parcels, but again, this census block is splitting county defined parcels. And so that, that wouldn't work. And the other problem we have then is once you start splitting a census block, is then you have to worry about, well, where are the people? Because you do have to reallocate people. And that's not always easy because you don't necessarily know the population counts. That parcel, it could be a single family dwelling unit, probably it is, but we have no idea how many people live there. The census doesn't have that information. We don't know how many people actually live there. Is it one person? Is it 5? We don't know the population even for the parcels. We just know there's a parcel there. We don't even know if it's occupied. I guess you could probably find out, but it gets very tricky when you start splitting census blocks, and there's a lot of other issues that then come up.
So Ken, I guess I was just going to clarify that in fact, that does split a parcel, right? So you've got a parcel that's in 2 different, so where do they vote? Well, if it goes right through the parcel, what do they get?
Well, that's the Register of Voters is going to have to reconcile issues like this, obviously. And I don't know the answer to that, Chris. That's
Okay.
the Register of Voters. But there is the intent of our plan was to create districts. The intent of our plan wasn't to separate individuals from voting in the appropriate district.
Depends which bedroom they have in the house, right?
Yeah. But
Well, I guess so. Yeah. So I mean, I agree with Commissioner Diaz. If we could fix this, we should, but it sounds like it's not really in our hands to fix, and it's somebody else's mistake and they need to address it.
yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
It's also
Ken,
something that the registrar may have some additional flexibility to pursue under the updated legislation that we were discussing a few weeks ago. Let me take Commissioner Dostal and then Commissioner Larson. Lydia, do you have a question? We lose her? Okay, Commissioner Larson?
Yeah, I guess I had a question. We're making recommendations. Does the registrar of voter have to take them? Or is this just their call in the end?
No, it's ours.
It is, yeah. I mean, my understanding is we're the ones that decide. The Register of Voters has asked us to do these, so I don't think they have to take what we provide them as boundaries, is my understanding. So that I don't think they can pick and choose.
Okay, so these are more decisions than recommendations.
Well, they're recommendations to the commission at this point. After Ken's done with his presentation, I'm going to take a motion for the commission to approve these changes. We'll then have a discussion. That's why I'm trying to limit right now to just questions to clarify what you're seeing on the maps, because this is very, very, very technical, detailed work. But once we have the motion, we can have a discussion about exactly what to do and what the options are. At that point, I'll probably ask counsel to weigh in as well on the different rules and regulations, although counsel should feel free to weigh in if it would help with the conversation at this point. But for right now, what I'd like to do is focus commissioners just on clarifying what's before you. And the registrar, I have to say, has been good. It's been in a good dialogue with us about this. They understand that something like this is going to be a challenge no matter who's working on it. It just seems to be, as Ken rightly said, it's our role is to define the supervisorial districts using the rules we have. And then we have to work with the registrar or hear more from the registrar about what to do.
Okay, thank you, and understood. I just didn't understand what recommendations meant. And you're really saying these are recommendations to us as the commission that will lead to our vote. We're not recommending anything to anyone else.
That's correct. And thank you for that clarification, Commissioner. That's very useful. All right. I still don't see Commissioner Dostal. Oh, there she is.
I'm back having internet issues. Sorry.
Okay. Did you have a question though?
No, I was just trying to get back in.
Okay, good. Okay. Not hearing or seeing any others. Ken, please continue.
Okay, next slide, please. So this is again a weird census geography. So what the Register of Voters is recommending is lopping off that long purple extension that goes straight up. And in this case, if you cut that off, you're splitting a census block because that long line is actually connected with the purple area right directly below it, which is a single census block. So this does split a census block by doing that. And we actually did look at this one to using some satellite imagery when we were talking with Flo. And what it turns out is that long line is actually a driveway that goes to that parcel. Oh gosh, I can't read it. 24, whatever it is right down there, the parcel that it connects in with. So that's the driveway to the house that's on that piece of property. And so I assume that's why the census connected it with the census block there, is because it was part of that property down there. But it's just a weird thing to have hanging out there. But we have no way to define our districts if we cut that off, because it would end up splitting census block. Any questions about that one? Okay, moving on. And this is Lake Hodges. This is just, that's the 15, there's a 15 freeway. So this is where the 15 freeway passes right next to Lake Hodges. North County Fair, the shopping center is right up here. But The area here is between a neighborhood and Lake Hodges, essentially. Below that purple dashed line is what the Registrar of Voters is asking to be moved from District 5 into District 2. There's no population in that area. But in this case, we can't, I said recommend a partial adjustment here because the part that kind of looks like a smiley face, if you will, down there has no population and it's a whole census block. But that block extends, if you go to the west, you can see where the block ends at the point there of the purple dashed line. So all of that area has no population. Once you go west of that census block where that purple line comes back down and reconnects down there with District 2, that's all in another census block. And it's cutting off just that little corner of that census block. So we can't do that little kind of, I don't know, pyramid shaped thing that's between the census block with the smiley face and District 2 and the purple dashed line, because that splits a census block. So we're recommending moving the one census block with no population that's fully contained, but not making that second move of the census block that is split. Questions about this one? Again, good mountain biking trails up here, so. Okay, moving on then, thanks. Okay, so this one, we actually ran through a bunch of these with the Register of Voters. So this one they called the elephant head. And you can kind of understand why if you look at it. If you look at in detail, the Register of Voters is asking that we make some adjustments to the trunk, if you will, of the elephant. You can see that District 2 extends along just the upper edge of that purple dashed line. And what they're asking is to move as much of that as possible from District 2 into District 5. They would also like those other areas underneath the purple dashed line to be moved from District 5 into District 2, but those contain population. So you can't do those ones. We can make part of the adjustment though, because that trunk area has no population. So there are several census blocks that are involved in this elephant head shape. There are two of them, which is the trunk that extends out. And this is along the 78, the 78 highway that extends out there. So we can move that census block. And then there's another census block right along the top edge of kind of the head, if you will, kind of where the eyes or the forehead of the elephant would be, that has no population that could also be moved. And so we're recommending to make a partial adjustment here where we move the census blocks that are whole and have no population, but don't move the remaining ones that have population or are being split. And again, this one doesn't change any of the information in the splits table. Keeps all of that information the same. And this area is just, where is this? I think we're just west of Santa Isabel. The next one is going to be right along an Indian reservation, I think, in the same area. But any questions?
Mesa Grande Reservation.
Yeah.
Ken, this looks more like a rhinoceros to me. And if you're talking about the horn, moving the horn from 2 into 5 is what.
Yeah, I can always count on you, Jack. Thank you.
I just couldn't see the elephant, but I can see the rhino. Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
I'd like to motion that we vote on the animal image we see.
And this is also the first anniversary of Commissioner Russ's imagery metaphors that will continue, I'm sure, for several years to come. Thank you. Go ahead, Ken.
Okay, going on to the next slide. Okay. So this is actually in the same area. It's moving a little bit to the east. And in this case, you see this peninsula sticking up. The Register of Voters, again, is recommending to move that peninsula area from District 2 into District 5, but it is connected with a census block. So we can't really move it. And there is population in this area. So it splits a census block and there is population involved. And so that's why not recommending to make this move. Any questions? What I didn't have an image of an animal in this case. I don't know what it is. Sorry. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the Santa Isabella Reservation. And so this actually involves quite a few geographies here. You can see the purple line that the Register of Voters is requesting kind of comes up and then cuts across there from District 5, lopping off that top part of District 2, and then kind of coming along the reservation lines. Now, the lines that we proposed follow the boundaries of the Indian Reservation or of the Santa Isabella Reservation in this area. And if we were to make the changes requested by the Register of Voters, we can't exactly follow the purple dashed line that they outlined, but we can move a series of census blocks that would contain that purple line that the Register of Voters is suggesting. And so they've got, so this slide came from the Register of Voters, obviously. So they're pointing out all these zero population blocks that are involved here, that you can see the lines pointing to them. There's another series of really what you could call sliver blocks that are down along the edges of the Indian Reservation or the Santa Isabella Reservation and the border of the precinct line. So there's several very narrow, I don't know why they're there, but they're very narrow strips of land that have been defined as individual census blocks in this area. And so to make the complete move and make sure everything is contiguous when we make this move, we don't create any islands or separations. We have to move these, is it 8? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, we have to move these 8 blocks. All of them have zero population and move them from District 2 into District 5. And it would, instead of following the purple dashed line, you can see the black broken line just below the purple dashed line. That is the boundary of the census block. And so it would follow the boundary of that census block and come across. There's a little triangular census block there. It would follow the lower edge of that triangular census block and then intersect with the Register of Voters precinct line again. So all that stuff above that kind of jagged census block line would move from District 2 into District 5. And this doesn't change any of the existing geographies in the splits table. Doesn't involve any population, just involves moving land mass from one district to another. Any questions about this one? I think we're almost done. Okay, next one. Again, this is kind of a strange one, and that, I'm not sure exactly why this one got connected actually down with District 2. You can see this edge, this little amoeba. I'll call this one an amoeba, or a paramecium. Isn't it a paramecium that looks like that, hanging out off the top of this area? You can see the line that the Register of Voters drew. And so in this case, they were looking for either or. Either you take the paramecium and move it from District 2 to District 5, or you fill in the area underneath the precinct line. And so what we're going with is taking those 2 census blocks that are underneath, kind of to the south of the precinct line that are currently in District 5, and moving them to District 2. Those census blocks have no population. And so that would make then this consistent with the request from the Register of Voters. And it doesn't have any impact, again, on the splits tables, on the list of geographies and how they're being divided in the table. And it involved moving those 2 census blocks. Again, this area is, again, kind of close to the Santa Isabella Reservation. There were several of these kind of out in that same area, I believe. Any questions? All right, next one. And again, this one is splitting a census block. If you can see the request from the Register of Voters is the purple dashed line. You can see the black dashed line that is defining the district boundary between 2 and 5. And this splits right through those census blocks. You can see it splits several of them. They're following very straight linear lines. Census blocks don't always follow linear lines. They're following more natural boundaries, roads. It looks like they're following a drainage out here of some sort of river. And so again, this is one that splits census blocks. And so we're recommending not to make it. And I think this was the last one in the deck. Any questions about this one? No?
You're
Okay.
muted, Jack. Jack, I think is talking.
Oh,
Were you?
Jack, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Ken, it says no structures in those areas. Does that mean no people?
yeah, I think this is an area that was north and east of Ramona. It says no structures, no structures. I think in this case, the Register of Voters was just trying to point out that not only does nobody live there, but there's no buildings or anything. This is just empty property.
Yeah, well, if there's no people, no structures, why would we not go with what the ROV says?
Because we don't have a way to provide a list of census blocks with this kind of a split. You'd have to go out there with I don't know. I guess the thing is our dictate is to provide whole census blocks as defining the supervisorial districts.
Okay.
This one wouldn't do that. So unless we have other rules or another mechanism.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. I think that's it. That's it for me then. Oh, well, I guess parting comment. So we also did run the summary stats sheet that we're all familiar with looking at with all the recommended changes. And again, the summary stat sheet, just to verify, has no changes in population for any of the districts, has no changes in the distributions by race or ethnicity for any of the districts, the CVAP numbers, the population distributions, and so on. All those tables remained exactly the same. In the splits table, if you make the recommended changes, the Sequan Indian Reservation would be made whole. That was split before. The Rancho San Diego census defined place, which was not split, would now be split. So that's one change. And then the University Community Planning Area, which was not split, would now be split. And there is one other change, and that is the size of the districts by square miles actually changes, and District 1 is the same size. District 2 gains 1 square mile. District 3 and 4 the same size. District 5 loses 1 square mile. So that's the net effect on the size of the districts from just landmass. And those are the only changes that would occur. Obviously, the boundaries, when you look at the boundaries, they would also change. But from a summary statistics standpoint, those are the changes.
Commissioner Pons?
Yeah, to my previous comments and questions, I'm going to withdraw them because just reflecting on my interest to the lessons learned, if we move forward and request economic and environmental impact studies in the future, we'll have that information for consideration. So I don't think it'd be worthwhile now to have someone do a deep dive, but in the future, it may be relevant. So I withdraw those 2 requests. Okay, Ken, thank you.
Okay, sure.
Any other questions or comments while Commissioner Inman has the floor? Co-Vice Chair Katerina.
I just had one quick question, Ken, and maybe this relates to staff too, but so what happens next? Are we going to see a new package that we deliver to the clerk of the board, or do we just deliver these changes and will they be reflected then on the links on the website.
I defer to others to answer that question at this point, I guess.
It's something where we need to spell out the next steps. Amy, if you and the rest of the commission are comfortable, I'd like to have that discussion once we have a motion on the table, if that's okay.
Yeah, and actually, I think it probably will just be covered in next steps anyway, so it's all right with me.
Okay, very good, thank you. But one more time, any more clarifications needed? Because really, it's very important, but it's also very detailed. And I want to give commissioners a moment. We can come back to these slides. In fact, maybe we will under discussion of the motion, but not seeing any other requests for the floor right now. I'll ask staff to take the slide down for the moment. I'll ask them to bring up a slide in a moment, not just yet, for a motion. Before we do anything else, I think commissioners, you can imagine how much time and effort it took to get to this point on these kind of changes and talking to the registrar of voters. So I hope you share in my thanking Ken and Flow Analytics for doing the work to get to this point. It really was complicated. I was part of one or two of them, but there was a lot of work that went on by Flow, by Counsel, by Ken, and some really great cooperation from the registrar of voters to discuss and define what was going on and commiserate when none of us knew why a block in a line was drawn the way it was, but we're all trying to serve the public and do the right thing. So Ken, thank you very much for the presentation as well. For the next step, I'd like to ask Andrew if there are any requests from the public to speak on this agenda item.
Thank you, Chair Boehm. Yes, we have one speaker who has submitted a request to speak. Also check for members of the public requesting to speak at today's meeting by raising a virtual hand. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the commission. We'll be calling speakers by name for those that are logged into the Zoom session or by the last 4 digits of their phone number for those that have called in. You'll hear or see notifications that you have been unmuted. For those calling in, you will need to dial *9 to raise a virtual hand. You will then need to press *6 to unmute your phone, and we'll ask each speaker to please state their name for the record. We're going to begin with the speaker that requested, John Lenmo, and I'm going to go ahead and unmute you at this time.
Good evening, commissioners. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Please proceed. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. My name is John Lemmo, and I represent the Sequan Band of the Kumeyaay Nation, and we are supportive of the recommendation, which appears, I think, on your first slide, whereby the map would be adjusted to place the 4 parcels that are unpopulated back into Supervisor District 2 for a variety of reasons, but we're in the support of the staff of the recommendation, and I'm available for any questions if there are any questions from the commissioners about this change, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are any additional members of the public that wish to address the commission on this item, please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. Chair Boehm, not seeing any virtual hands raised. That concludes public testimony in this item.
Very good, thank you. So let me ask staff to bring up the motion that we've drafted in preparation for this. And let me briefly describe what you see on the screen. What we recommend be considered by the commission is to approve the changes as recommended in Commissioner Inman's presentation right now. That's the first point. And the second point, which we can discuss in more detail in a moment, is to authorize the officers, meaning the chair and the co-vice chairs, to communicate these approvals to the registrar of voters so that they can begin making those adjustments or researching what other steps may need to be taken. Now, I want to be clear, this will not be the end of the process, because if the commission approves this motion, we would then need to issue resolutions, and I'll ask counsel to explain that in a moment once the motion is on the floor, but we'd have to issue some resolutions to formally approve the changes as part of and therefore resubmitted to resubmitting, I should say, the redistricting plan and the final report. So we'll talk about that in more detail in a moment. But before I requested a commissioner to suggest this motion, I wanted to be clear about that. As this is an action item, however, that requires a motion before further discussion, let me ask if there is a motion. I'll read it for the record now, to approve technical changes to the 2021 redistricting plan and final report, adjusting the boundaries of the supervisorial districts for the County of San Diego Board of Supervisors as included with the agenda materials, and to authorize the IRC officers to communicate approval of these technical changes to the County of San Diego Registrar of Voters. Do I have a motion or a commissioner making this motion?
A second.
I'm sorry, who made, I caught Commissioner Russ. Who made the motion?
This is ours.
Thank you, sir. All right. Since the rest of the question was there, and I always want to make sure I gave an accurate reflection, Marguerite, are you there? And can you just explain the process or clarify anything that I just said?
I am here. And the process would be as you described. There would need to be a document, probably a supplemental resolution that amends the primary resolution adopting the final plan. It would make changes primarily in the list of census blocks, not in the recitals, but in the list of census blocks contained in each district. So it would be a short resolution, including the technical amendments. It would be consistent with the resolution that you passed, because the resolution you passed recognizes that there will be technical amendments. So this is, number one, anticipated, and number two, extremely common with redistricting. And you have given the public lots of notice that this would occur by including this in the resolution, providing a method for getting this accomplished and including it in your bylaws. So I imagine at your next meeting, a very short document with these minor changes to the plan. You also have your final report. My recommendation that the final report contain an addendum, very short, a couple of pages, that would indicate the changes in the data, which are minimal. This would be the square mileage. This would be the splits chart. So there would be a change with university and the cemetery. There would be a change with the CDP and the reservation. So it'd be very, very minor. In other words, we're not redoing the whole report. These are minor changes in the data portion. Now, in addition to those two legal documents, there are maps and data charts that are online. There is the DSM and the map viewer. And I believe that's all the documents. And all of those would require changes. They will be imperceptible to most anybody that looks at them, but they need to be accurate. And the rubric accompanying them would reflect that they reflect the final plan of the IRC with technical changes. So if this motion is approved, we will prepare that documentation for you to review at your next meeting. Of course, if the commission is of the opinion this shouldn't be done or doesn't want to go through the irritation of doing it or the hassle of doing it, then nothing needs to be done. And that would be the outcome of a no vote. And those are the options. Is there anything more I should address, Chair Bain?
That question is best directed to the commissioners. Thank you for that, Marguerite. Thank you for explaining it so clearly. But commissioners, again, I know this is somewhat technical, and I know there's only been so much time. I will ask, now that we have the motion, for staff to take the slide down so we can see one another a little more easily, and ask if commissioners have any questions or comments for Marguerite. And then if there are any other comments or discussion points. Commissioner Diaz.
Yeah, my question pertains to the legislation that was referenced earlier that gives authority to the registrar of voters to make these adjustments. And so referring back to my previous question about one of the precincts that was divided, and it appeared to be just one household. Well, only three affected, but just wanted some clarity on that.
Let me clarify my comment, and then I'm sure Marguerite can fix it. I was referring to the flexibility they have on some of the times and dates they have to work on, because from the flavor of the conversation, I think others would agree, particularly Commissioner Inman, was that these are going to be some challenges, and they probably have some other challenges within their work that they have to do. But let me ask Marguerite to clarify things further.
And thank you, Chair. There are timing concerns that the registrar of voters is working from. The registrar has full authority to adjust the precincts, even if you make no changes. So with that, I know exactly, Commissioner Diaz, the one that you're looking at. We're challenged there because we don't know where the population is. The registrar is able to go out to that area, find out where the house is, and change the precinct. They can subdivide precincts, they can have ballot types. So there are many options that the registrar has. It was always anticipated that the commission would work cooperatively with the registrar, and the registrar has asked for these few accommodations to make its job easier. And the recommendations are the one that the commission believes that it can make, or that the SPOC, subject to commission approval.
But thank you, Commissioner Diaz, as well, and Commissioners Chen and Pons for getting all this on the record. It is important to have those rationales and thinking explained. So thanks for all those comments. I will not thank Commissioner Russ for his animal analogies. We'll save that for later. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, discussion before we move to a vote? So again, just to explain, a vote yes on this motion will in effect approve the recommendations in Commissioner Inman's presentation, and also approve a decision to not agree to the requests that were made on the not recommended slides. So just to be clear on all that. All right. With no other requests for the floor, Andrew, would you please call the roll for a vote?
Thank you. I will note that commissioners' names will continue to be called at random. So with that, Commissioner Russ.
Aye.
Commissioner Diaz.
Aye.
Co-Vice Chair Katerina.
Aye.
Commissioner Inman.
Aye.
Commissioner Krugliak.
Aye.
Commissioner Dostal.
Aye.
Chair Bain.
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Commissioner Pons.
Aye.
Co-Vice Chair Garcia.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Larson.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
That motion passes, noting for the record that Commissioner Serban is absent. That passes with all commissioners who are present voting aye.
Very good. Thank you again, commissioners, for the robust questions and discussion. Thank you again, Commissioner Inman. Thank you, Marguerite. And I'm glad to see that moving along. Again, as Marguerite explained, there'll be a little bit of follow-up action at our next meeting, but the commission stance certainly makes that job easier, and it's appreciated. We now turn to agenda item 5, discussion of the IRC lessons learned report. I want to thank commissioners for their remarkably insightful and useful thoughts. I know it must have taken a great deal of time during a busy period, as well as a great deal of thought to put these contributions together, and I'm sure we're all mutually grateful to one another for doing so. I also want to thank the other stakeholders in the process who've contributed, Dr. Gross and Flow Analytics, and of course, Commissioner Pons for both his work and his continued strong advocacy that led to the successful point that we're now at. How I hope we can proceed on this is to turn in a moment to public comment, then a brief presentation with some summary statistics about these lessons learned from Co-Vice Chair Katerina. And then, as noted in the agenda, it seemed appropriate to provide commissioners with a chance to make 1-minute statements, both to highlight their own lessons or to comment on lessons from others that you've seen in the documentation that was sent prior to the meeting. After those 1-minute statements, we can discuss lessons learned in a bit more detail in a slightly more general way, and then turn to possible further action. As we discussed at our last meeting, such action could include formulating an ad hoc committee to review today's discussion and perhaps draft an executive summary for IRC consideration at our next meeting that would highlight the lessons garnering the most support from commissioners. We can talk more about that later. Before we proceed any further, however, I'd like to turn to any requests for public comment, any requests from the public to comment on the lessons learned as they have been posted. Andrew, are there any requests from the public to speak on this agenda item?
Thank you, Chair Bam. Yes, we have one request to speak on this item. Also check for members of the public requesting to speak by raising a virtual hand. Again, each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the commission. We'll be calling speakers by name for those that are logged into Zoom, or by the last 4 digits of the phone number for those that have called in. You will hear or see a notification that you have been unmuted. For those calling in, you will need to press *9 to raise a virtual hand, and then you'll need to press *6 to unmute your phone. We'll ask each speaker to state their name for the record. We'll begin with the individual that requested to speak. It looks like this is Robert Case. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak at this moment.
Can you hear me?
We can, thank you. Please proceed.
Good evening, good evening. So first and foremost, I want to thank you guys as a commission for the excellent job that you did. I don't think it's a loss on anyone in San Diego. The scale of the mission that you accomplished. So I appreciate it. I know that this is not an easy process to follow. And I say that as the chair of my own independent redistricting commission in the city of Escondido. So one of the lessons that I learned as a young Marine was the value of mentorship, right? The value of not reinventing the wheel, so to speak. The question that I have, and maybe you guys want to address this after the your next section where you go over the summary, but the question that I have on behalf of another independent redistricting commission would be, through the midst of all this, what do you think are the top 3 lessons learned that independent bodies like our redistricting commission can apply to make their process smoother and more effective? And that's my time.
Thank you very much. Are there any additional members of the public that wish to address the commission on this item? If so, please raise your hand in Zoom. Chair Bay, I'm not seeing any virtual hands being raised. That concludes public testimony in this item.
Very good. Well, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Chair Case, and thank you, members of the public who are attending. I'm sure we'll be addressing that and other things in just a moment. Next, though, I'd like to turn to Co-Vice Chair Katerina for a presentation on summary statistics. Amy.
Thank you, David. I think staff can pull up the lessons learned summary statistics. I'll just give you a quick overview because we all got these statistics or this information at the same time. And I asked my daughter to put together some slides that would kind of summarize where we are, just to give us a feel of overall what kinds of comments, how many people participated, what was the SWOT analysis breakdown, and that can help us direct our conversation, and certainly can help direct any future efforts on developing a lessons learned final report. So next slide, please, Chim, if you may. So this is just, I know it's a lot of information, but it is a summary of the SWOT analysis by category. And you can see, looking at organization, for example, had the most comments with 28 total comments. Personnel also had a lot of comments. I think it was 21 comments, but you can notice that they had a high number of threat compared to all the rest of the areas. So I think that those types of information can help us direct our efforts in improving our processes and our commission as a whole, and certainly provide information to the next commission. And if we go to the next slide, this just shows the numbers. So you can see how the breakdown, how it flows over the different SWOT areas. You can see lots of opportunities, and I think this is really great. I mean, yes, there are some areas where weaknesses are identified, very few threats, and also a good number of strengths. So I think we have completed our task. We're in a good position, and we're in an excellent position to make recommendations to improve an already strong program. Next slide.
Can I ask
if you don't
Debbie
mind.
Cross on that one for a moment?
Oh, sure.
Because I do want to point out to commissioners, because I think this is important for our discussion. There are a number of categories where some commissioners thought a category fell under one topic area in SWOT analysis, and other commissioners thought it was in another. That's, of course, perfectly understandable, but I would ask commissioners, as we get into the discussion, to think about exactly how do we characterize a given issue, and in particular, if there is some recommendation or solution we can offer, that will be presumably of the most value to our successors and for people looking at this down the road, along the lines of what Chair Case said, people looking at it right now and possibly using it. So I just wanted to give commissioners one extra moment to just look at how those different perceptions work. Again, I think that's healthy, but I think it is something to keep in mind as we talk, and make sure if we do see commonalities or shared assessments of what an issue might be or where it might be headed, that we draw on it. Sorry to interrupting you.
No, that's fine. And that's an excellent point. And it does come up later as well. So for example, I can tell you that I chose to identify some legal issues under finance because it was such a huge line item in our budget. But it clearly could be addressed in a number of other areas as well. And so perhaps when we start thinking about how to talk about these issues, we can talk about the issue and then where it might come into play, whether it's an organizational and a leadership issue, or a finance and a doctrine issue, or whatever that combination might be. The next slide is just to give you a feel for the number of responses that we received for each category, and then how many individuals commented on those in those areas. So for example, we received 28 comments on organization, and that came from 13 different individuals. And I think this is important to know as you start looking at numbers. Were there 13 commissioners who had concerns with financial issues? When you look at the numbers, it was really 9 different individuals. So it just helps give you a frame of reference for what's behind some of those statistics. Next slide. And then this is just an area ranked interest by order of number of comments. Which of these categories received the most comments? And again, as Chair Bain mentioned, there is overlap between these, but it certainly does give you some direction as to where we can start focusing our efforts as we move forward during discussion. And I think, is that my last one? Oh, okay, recommended action. So this is really a slide that addresses, it gives you a feel for what are our biggest issues? Well, there's only 3% of the recommended actions that are to cancel. So I find that to be a very good number. It shows certainly that there's room for improvement in this area, but it's not a significant number that would indicate that we had made some serious errors in our process. 18% of the comments would like to continue as is, and almost 80% said perhaps there's some modification. And I think that's probably what we should be focusing on is improvements to our existing systems. And I'm happy to answer any questions. This is really just, this is all numbers. There's not really much analysis here. You know, I think that will come out as we move through our discussion. I would have liked to do more analysis, but you know, given the timing and getting this information, you know, last night, there just wasn't enough time to make everything happen. But I think we will. I think we have enough information to provide us with some structure moving forward. Now back to you, Chair Boehm, unless anyone has any specific questions.
Not hearing or seeing any specific questions. Amy, thank you for that. And when we get to the broader discussion or the motion discussion, I do think it'll be worth thinking about whether we want to pursue some analysis in some way. I do share your agreement, though. The fact that almost 80% of the recommendations involved modifying something shows that people took this seriously. We have learned some lessons that we want to pursue and apply. So with that, on a completely voluntary basis, I'd like to ask any commissioners interested to offer about 1-minute statements, either to highlight their own inputs or to offer comments on other inputs that they saw. And again, my compliments to all my fellow commissioners for providing such useful comments. If it's okay, I'll take a running list, or we can just ask. Well, let me see a show of hands first. How many commissioners would like to take advantage of making a statement? Okay, good. Unless there's objection, I'm just going to call an order rather than use the randomizer, if that's okay, with the understanding that we'll follow the rules the rule we followed before at times and save the officers for the end. So with that in mind, if that's acceptable. Okay. So we'll go with Commissioner Russ. Hold on, let me make sure we're getting, okay. So right now I have Commissioners Russ, Chen, Inman, Hansen, Larson. Stay with me for a moment. Commissioners Diaz and Krugliak. Commissioner Pons, sorry. And then Co-Vice Chair Garcia and Co-Vice Chair Katerina. Okay, so Commissioner Russ, then Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I appreciate it, reading the other things that other commissioners had deemed important. That was interesting. I have not gotten through all of the comments just yet, but I do think probably the best work and the most detailed work was done in the ad hoc committees. I think those were of great importance. They came back, you know, with various things that they have thought of, and really, I think, served the commission as a whole very well. So I like the ad hoc committees. Would think that they can maybe be used even more. The one big thing that I thought was problematic is the handling of the public comment, and I really don't have a suggestion for that. I don't know. How do we get this get the public comment kind of amalgamated, kind of so that we're not just hearing over and over, people reading the same points. But I think probably the weakest link in the chain possibly was just being able to absorb all of the public comment, both the emails and also the written.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Chen, then Commissioner Inman.
I had a couple of lessons learned. I discussed them with staff. I don't see them in the document. So I can only remember one of them at the moment. So let me tell you what that one was, which was I noticed that we got a lot more public engagement once we published maps. So I would say a lesson learned probably for a future commission is potentially publish maps early on, even if they're just the maps from the existing maps. Put something out there because I think that really drives public comment, and you'll get the public engaged much earlier on that way. Done.
Thank you for that. And Commissioner Chen, please feel free to raise any that you remember later, or if staff can be in touch, I certainly wouldn't want to rule anything out of the discussion. Commissioner Inman, then Commissioner Hanson.
So one of the top things to consider, especially for the Commission in Escondido, echo what Commissioner Russ said, and that is have a plan for the intake of public comment, have a way to organize it, think through how to categorize it. So that's a really important part of this. We were just inundated with public comment towards the end. And so an efficient way to manage that. The other things that I thought were important is to work on training. We had a lot of training about process and procedure, but I think we should have done more in terms of the nuts and bolts of mapping, GIS systems, geographies, understanding how jurisdictions interact and the impacts of dividing jurisdictions. We didn't get down to that until the end. Another thing that I would recommend is starting the commission to give them a full 12 months at least. We were lucky, well, lucky, unlucky, I don't know how you want to look at it, but we had 12 months. So I think that would be key. And then online meetings, find a way to allow your commission to meet online. You don't need to have a pandemic to go online. It was very much more efficient. And you can have in-person meetings, but you also, the online meetings saved us, especially at the end. So those are my main things. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hanson, followed by Commissioner Larson. You're muted. Thank you.
I want to apologize for not contributing to the information you received. I've had terrible communication problems at the end and I just didn't get the information. So that's something that needs to be addressed, I guess. My biggest misunderstanding about this whole thing, and I think it's true for many of us, was the concept of our independence. The independence of this commission was emphasized from the beginning. And I personally did not understand that from the beginning, we were independent, but actually we were under the direction and the supervision of an administrative staff and legal counsel that had been assembled before we were ever chosen. And that set up a lot of frustration and disappointment for everybody, I think. So that needs to be understood, the meaning of the word independence. And that's all I'll say about that. The other thing is I think we should have spent the early months of our year more actively engaging groups in our own existing districts. Rather than what happened was we sat back and we hoped that everybody would step up equally or equitably. And in fact, in the end, there were some that totally missed the message all along, and we had big conflict. And there are a lot of organizations that could have helped us to identify groups that we could have actively engaged by going out to them and speaking. I know that was done at a very minimal level, but if we had spent more of our time doing that in those early months, we would have better understood the community and they would have had somebody to put a face on this for them and their organizations. So that would be something I would recommend.
Thank you very much for that. And Barb, I'll just say again, thank you for doing whatever you could and having your patience on the technical difficulties. I did make a very explicit lesson learned on information technology support because 10 years from now, something may change, but I really do want to thank you for the patience on that. Commissioner Larson, then Commissioner Diaz.
Well, thank you. And it's a real privilege to be able to follow Barb Hanson. She represents my thoughts entirely. I totally agree with her. I did take a little time today to read what others have written. There's nothing I don't disagree with or agree. I agree with most of what was said. That's what I wanted to say. I formulated 11 recommendations, and I think they speak for themselves. Some of my comments were wordy and they got truncated, but I think the idea came across. I guess I hope everyone knows that the comments I've made, and I'm sure this is true for others, they are for improvement. They're not really meant to be negative, even though they may sound a little negative. I think we did a really terrific job in the work we've done in the last 12 or so months. I'm very proud of what we did, and I'm proud of the fact that we did come to a conclusion, and we compromised and came up with what I think will be a very good map that will be in a very good standing for the next 10 years. So we should all congratulate ourselves on that. And one of my comments was that we really should have a celebratory party or something to celebrate that we did it. We're the first ones to do it. We did it. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Commissioner, I'm going to hold comment on that till later in the discussion, but do appreciate it. Commissioner Diaz, then Commissioner Kugliak. Sonia.
Yes, and on that note, Arv, I am the first one to attend any social event that you recommend. Again, that is a good point. We as a commission, I think, being the first, we were very fortunate to have many people, many different skill sets, life experiences, and professional expertise. That is one of the strengths that I think that made us unique. But a lot of my comments were also what addressed the pre-work before we even formed as a commission. One of them was, again, establishing our independence. I recommended the creation of an executive director position that would be hired by the commission to kind of separate those duties of administrative duties away from the other activities that the commission would be provided. This is have done in other commissions across the state, and I think is a really good model. And I know I'm out of time, but I recommend early on looking at the bylaws. We amended the bylaws to create officer positions, and I'd recommend other independent commissions really take a good look at their bylaws at the very beginning of the process rather than later to delegate and divide responsibilities and duties. That said, also, I did not particularly enjoy our procurement process through the County of San Diego. Feel free to read that comment that I left there on the table. And I see my time has been up, so I will allow other commissioners to chime in.
Thank you very much. And again, the discussion will continue. I just wanted to give everybody a chance at the beginning to provide some highlights. Commissioner Kugliak, then Commissioner Pons.
Thank you. So my number one take home that I've said a ton is we cannot make decisions on a district by district basis. It has to look at the whole map, because when we make decisions on a district by district basis without understanding the impact to other districts, we end up with surprises at the end. I agree with Commissioner Inman that we should start earlier. I think that we have to keep a single chair, ideally one with mediation experience and strong experience running meetings. I agree with Chair Bame's comment about our purpose. Commissioners were not sufficiently aware from the beginning that they were not chosen as representatives for districts, but rather for reflecting the county's political diversity. I think if we were educated on that better, it would have been great. Mapping software should have been provided to the commissioners before selecting a demographer. We should have gotten a lot more maps from the public, but it just wasn't doable. Similarly, the statistical analysis should have been provided to us by the ability to elect contractor before selection. We should not use springboard maps. They're confusing. We should guide the collection of public feedback and then use sentiment analysis software to drive insights. And then we have to shorten meetings. No one's good after 8 hours.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Pons, then Co-Vice Chair Garcia.
Thanks, Chair Vane. That minute goes by really quickly. First, thanks to Commissioner Katarina and her daughter for the analysis. Greatly appreciated. To Chair Case, the United States Marine Corps, regarding mentorship, I made a recommendation to establish an advisory group from this commission to enable the process for the next commission. And we can capture those lessons learned and fast forward those to facilitate the process. So lastly, what do we do with the lesson learned other than create the report? My response is nothing. I think we should allow the next commission to inherit the lessons learned and then to apply those lessons through 1, the bylaws, 2, the protocols, and 3, the rules and regulations that they're going to use to execute the process and for the next redistricting. So let's not do anything but create the lessons learned report and move it forward to the next commission. Thank you.
I was about to turn to Co-Vice Chair Garcia. I thought I saw a hand, but I guess not. So Rosette, please.
Thank you. I was able to read through all of the comments, and I just want to say that I found them. So thank you for everybody who took the time. It was a little cumbersome. I thought the tool was a little hard for me anyway. So thank you for all of the comments. I thought they were all really useful and informative. I don't disagree with any of the previous comments that were made. And if anything, I have maybe some minor quibbles with some of the comments that were made. Overall, though, agree. I think we all have very similar feelings about how we can provide information to the next commission to do things better. I think we need clearer policies and procedures that explicitly lay out processes and authority. A lot of that is still pretty vague. We act on it implicitly rather than explicitly. I agree, we need to look for ways to be more efficient, both in meetings and between meetings. I think we need to do, I personally think we need to do more team building and work in smaller groups throughout, especially during the mapping process. I found the fact that we all worked in isolation, not a very good way for us to develop these maps. A lot to be done, I think, with the mapping process. And then finally, and I know I'm out of time, but this is, I think, one of the biggest issues for our redistricting commission and maybe for all. And these lessons learned are for, I think, geared for the next commission, but there's another audience, and that's the people who are writing the rules or the laws about how these commissions work. And I think that for me, the biggest lesson learned has to do with the timeline. We, in some ways, as Commissioner Inman said, in a way got lucky. We got a little bit of bonus time. It was viewed as a bad thing that the census data was delayed, but that gave us extra time. I don't know what we would have done if we had to adopt a map by August 15th with a bunch of, newbies trying to learn everything we needed to learn, put in processes in place, and then learn mapping and draw maps by August 15th. As it was, we had more time. The mapping time was constricted, but I think even if we had had the full amount of mapping time, you all know how difficult it was to get to a final map. So to me, the biggest lesson learned is how can we figure out a way to actually have the time that we need to develop, a good, well thought out and then defensible map. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Co-Vice Chair Katarina.
Hi, I'm going to focus just quickly on the future because that's exactly what these lessons are applicable to. we need to provide this information to the new commission, and we need to set them up in a way that allows them to make the doctrine decisions that we had made for us, but it would allow them to make it themselves. And I believe this points to selecting an interim legal team and an interim potentially leader for this group, or at the very least, a transition or advisory group, as Commissioner Pons suggested. I think we will be able to hand everything off and put them in the right place to move forward and let them make the decisions on whether or not they want an executive director or want to use county staff or want what any of the hundreds of other things that we didn't have those choices. But I do want to reflect that county staff did an amazing job and we couldn't have done it without them. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And I will take 1 minute. Please run that clock because that might be a new refreshing experience for me. Thank you. Something that wasn't mentioned, and I really do want to highlight, we weren't just the first commission to do this work around here. We did it under a pandemic. And while it can't be ruled out in 10 years, I really, really hope no commission ever has to face those challenges again, because it affected every single aspect of our work. I couldn't agree more on the various comments that were made now and in writing about public comment and maps. But exactly the problem. We were left with a timeline, and I completely agree with Co-Vice Chair Garcia on timeline being one of the central points, where we had to cope with a compacted time to receive input, even as we were doing the most important of our work, amount of our work or parts of our work, and we wanted the most public comment. Lots of other detailed comments to make, but I did want to highlight that, express my appreciation, and also confirm something Commissioner Larson said. I do think that there is a legitimate issue to be taken up by our commission on what we learned regarding independence. But I don't think that's in any way to undercut or question the role of staff that we had. I found them to be incredibly responsive and respectful of our independence. I just want to be careful that we tackle that independence question just along the lines of what most commissioners have already said. All right, thank you for that. Sorry to exceed the time, but really thank you for those introductory remarks, because I think that's very helpful. All right, we'll ask to take the clock down. Now we have, we purposely built into the agenda kind of two options here. I do want us to move towards a motion respecting the time, because I did hear enough tonight to make me think there is interest in having the most agreeable, let's say, the ideas for getting the most support enshrined in some sort of report that can be read, rather than just having the Excel spreadsheet that will remain on the website and in the record. So I do want to move towards a discussion of that. I'm happy to entertain a slightly continued discussion as we just had, because I know 1 minute was limiting, or if commissioners would like to, we can just move on to a motion.
And Chair
Let me just
Boehm,
ask, yeah, I'm sorry, Andrew, please.
if I could interrupt, I do see that we have one member of the public that has raised their hand that might have wished to address the commission. If you'd like to take their comment briefly.
It's a little bit exceptional, but given that it's lessons learned and we were just talking about public engagement, I wouldn't mind amending the procedure. Not seeing any objection. Please, Andrew, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to invite Janine Arakat.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. Thank you all. This is Janine Arakat with PANA again. It's been an honor to get to engage with you all. I just really wanted to thank you all for your dedication and that you continue to uplift public comment, even though you had one less month than you would have normally had under circumstances. So although it was difficult, and it was important to get every person to get to speak, even if at times it meant to seem repetitive. So I thank you all, and really thank you for your intentional process through it all and your lessons learned. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair
you.
Bain.
Thank you. No, thank you for flagging that. And again, thanks to all members of the public who are still with us and have been with us. What I'm going to do is turn to Co-Vice Chair Caterina's request to the floor. Then I'll ask for any more general comments before moving to a motion, but I really do want to be respectful of Commissioner's time. If we can move to the motion discussion, we'll do so. But Amy, please go ahead.
Respectfully, Chair, I would like to request that we have some discussion on this topic, perhaps some additional discussion. But I would like to suggest we postpone the motion until after the next agenda item. Because I am looking forward, and one of my comments was to talk about making sure that we set up our next commissioners in 2030 with a temporary team. And I'm afraid if we don't have a plan for that, we're going to have the same thing happen again, that county council is going to assign a legal team, and because they're going to need one to get started. So my hope is that we could have some discussion and then perhaps vote to postpone the motion 5.3 until after the discussion of the update on the legal contract.
Okay. What I'm thinking through is, while that's certainly possible, we have a bit of a potential challenge on how long we can continue discussion without some motion on the floor. Let me first ask, are any other commissioners interested in offering any other comments at this time that they would have offered under 1 minute during statements? Co-Vice Chair Garcia.
Yeah, just actually a minor comment that came up earlier. And when you met, I think Chairman, you mentioned that some of the comments, some people commented on certain items under one category and the same topic under a different category. And Amy also mentioned that, you know, she made a comment about legal under finance. And I wanted, my point there is that whatever it is that we decide to do with these lessons learned, it could be that we should change some of the categories or topic headings. And in fact, one of my lessons learned was that with this lessons learned module or rubric or whatever, that perhaps the categories needed to be revised. So that was just a comment about process, really.
No, that's useful, but that's exactly what I'm wrestling with. And it's a purely procedural issue that I really don't want to waste people's time on. But that's exactly why I want to move on to a motion, because that for me becomes part of the motion, particularly the tasking to an ad hoc.
But we have an item on the agenda that says discussion. So can we not just have the discussion? We have
we can certainly continue with the discussion. It's just that I want to be careful of how we construct it and have as broad a discussion as possible of the motion as well, because again,
but the discussion is separate from the motion.
Okay. All right. I have several commissioners now. Commissioner Brown. Co-Vice Chair Caterina, if you don't mind, I'm going to take Commissioners Hanson and Diaz first, if that's okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Brown.
Hi. I just want to let you know I'm just not feeling well tonight, so that's why I didn't really participate too much, but I am listening to everybody and I appreciate all your comments and I agree. We just had an earthquake here too, up in Escondido. So it was kind of a valley center, like a large jolt. I don't know if anybody else felt it. Anyhow, I'm going to go back and lay down, but I am listening to you.
Okay, thank you for that and hope you feel better soon.
Yeah, I will.
Commissioner Hanson.
I just was drawing a little piece of paper. I don't think you can see it too much, but when I use SWOT analysis in my teaching experience working with students, we had one piece of paper that had SWOT on it. And then on the top of the paper, it had a question. Like, and in our case, it would be, how helpful were personnel in this process? If personnel was the question. And then you would put all the strengths, all the weaknesses, all the opportunities, and all the threats on one page. And then you would look at it and you would say, is this something we want to pursue? And can the strengths be used to overcome the weaknesses? Can the opportunities be used to overcome the threats? Without seeing it in that format, I hardly recognize the process that we were going by. So maybe that's what we need to do with now the information we have. Take these essential questions, which were the topics that were listed, and state them in the form of a question, and then organize the comments based on strength in answer to that question, a weakness in answer. I don't know, maybe people would see it better that way. I was confused by the matrix as well, because that's not the way it's organized in my brain. So I would love to be on an ad hoc committee that would take what we have and apply it in a different, slightly different format and see if we can make it more understandable to a wider audience. That's it.
Thank you for that. It's a really interesting idea. And I want to think about as we move forward, and please, Commissioner Hanson and others, please think about how we can apply that in any decision we make tonight. I can think of several ways to do it, but I want to keep talking about it as we go. Please, Barbara.
One other thing real quick. Aren't we a member of this commission until the next commission is formed technically?
That is very, very true.
Couldn't we agree to meet quarterly, biannually, or whatever, at some over this period of time and discuss these issues as we go along and come up with new ideas of how they could be addressed so that we would not lose the continuity and the interest that we already have?
And if I can take the floor for a minute on process, the simple answer is yes. But frankly, my original intent had been to map that kind of thing out in this meeting. That was before we knew about the various technical adjustments that Commissioner Inman did such a good job getting us to work on, but we had to spend some time on that tonight. So I very much have it in mind that for our next meeting in January, which I am hearing enough interest in that I'm confident we'll want to have it, what we do after February 1st as a commission will be a good topic to discuss. And if commissioners have the time and interest, I'm sure we can support in some way continued meetings. On a number of these issues, though, there are Brown Act requirements that we are going to have to address and will require some thought. Some of that we may be able to do tonight as part of our current discussion. Some of that we'll probably have to do in that period in 2 weeks. But the points are very well taken. And as you said, if we have an ad hoc committee meeting between now and then, maybe that committee can work through it a little bit. So thank you for that. We'll certainly try to find a way to address some of that. All right, I have Commissioner Diaz. I have Commissioner Dostal and Co-Vice Chair Katerina. Amy, do you want to keep waiting or do you want to speak after? Okay. So Commissioner Diaz, then Commissioner Dostal.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly support what Commissioner Hanson's suggesting, and I was actually going to make a motion to create an ad hoc committee to explore lessons learned in how we want to format that for the next commission. And I don't know if it needs to be in a written form or like the report, like a report, or just like the SWOT analysis as illustrated earlier.
Okay, thank you for that. And we'll come back to that. I've got hands from Commissioner Dostal, Commissioner Brown, Commissioner Katerina. Commissioner Brown, because you're not feeling well and have other earthquakes as well. Stephanie, do you want to take the floor right now?
I think she went to lie down, she said.
And just left her hand up.
Yeah.
No?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, good. I'm sorry. Commissioner Dostal.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment because I think it's reflected in the written comment, but it sounds like maybe I disagree with a majority of the commission on the independence of the commission. The way I saw that is we are independent from the elected officials, and that does not preclude us from using staff. And I actually suggested we use staff more because they have the expertise, is particularly on procurement. I think we a little bit, with respect, we a little bit got in the way of that process because we didn't know all the requirements of the confidentiality and all that sort of thing. And having been on the Chula Vista commission, we had city council as our council, and I didn't see a problem with that. They, of course, did not see a problem with that, or they wouldn't have done it. I mean, that was county council's decision, so that I don't know that there's really much we can do about that. But we use staff for procurement, we use staff for, and I thought it made our process of actually working on maps much more efficient because we didn't have to spend time on procurement. We were pretty much exclusively looking at maps. So that's just my comment. I wanted to say it because I didn't do a minute, but that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. And I think it's good that you brought up that comment. All right, I have Co-Vice Chair Caterina, Co-Vice Chair Garcia. Before I turn to Amy, Andrew, I've now heard enough that I think we probably should entertain at least a motion to proceed along the lines of what Co-Vice Chair Caterina laid out. In other words, table the actual motion regarding lessons learned and have the discussion of the next agenda item on General Counsel Services update. I assume that will take a vote to take that order. So let me take the two co-vice chairs first, and then we'll presumably, and then I'd like to suggest we take a motion to that effect and pursue that. So
if I might, Chair Bain, and this would be totally up to Amy. My comment was in response to Commissioner DeStahl. So if I could, I don't know what Commissioner Caterina's was. So if I could go next, I think that might make sense, but just a suggestion.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I wanted to say, Commissioner to Olivia, if you don't mind, I had similar comments. I even suggested that we use staff for outreach and communications because they have tremendous resources for that. It's my understanding that independence with regard to with our commission has to do that we are independent from the Board of Supervisors, from the elected officials. And I did not ever find that we were that our staff was in conflict with their, their ability to sort of do the work that they needed to do to support our work and the Board of Supervisors. So from my point of view, I think that there are a lot of efficiencies and effectiveness and even fiscal efficiencies that come from using county staff and even county staff for general counsel, although we've been told that that decision is apparently not ours to make. So I just wanted to say that I agree with you on that point, Commissioner DeStahl.
Thanks. And if I could just clarify something I said, when I said we used in Chula Vista, the city council, I meant city attorney's office, not the city council. That was the independence. We did not work with the city council. We worked with the city attorney as our general counsel. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Co-Vice Chair Caterina.
Sorry, I gotta turn off my mute. Yeah, and I'll just say one quick thing, and that is to mirror what Co-Vice Chair Garcia said. And that is, I believe that staff did an amazing job, and I believe they were independent. But I also believe that the commission should make that decision. And I think that's what I'm trying to get to. And we can, recommend options, right? Or make a recommendation. But that is my thought, is that this is really what the commission needs to do. And that's where it goes back to a lot of the doctrine discussion. So I would like to reiterate that I would prefer to table 5.3, possible approval of next steps, including formation of ad hoc committee, to after we have finished agenda item 6, update on legal counsel, because I think some of the issues are relevant to how we might formulate our the structure of the motion.
Second,
Okay, so we'll take that as a motion. Let me just ask staff or clerk, did you get that motion in enough detail, or do we need to reread it?
I have it captured to table agenda item 5.3 until after discussion on agenda item 6.
And I have that offered by Co-Vice Chair Katerina, seconded by Commissioner Chen. Correct? Very good. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, Andrew, would you please call the roll for, I'm sorry, Commissioner Diaz?
Sorry, I'm just confused on the context of why we would even consider postponing this, because I was hoping that that could be clarified by Commissioner Katerina.
That was your work today?
We have an update on our legal counsel, and per the amended contract that was sent to everybody earlier today, we will have no general counsel as of February 1st. And so if for example, we need to have a meeting on February 5th, for some strange reason, something gets delayed, we would have no counsel and no mechanism to attempt to establish one. So, and as Rosette said, we cannot use county counsel for this purpose. So it was my thought that we would have to, we might want to include in our motion additional structure for the ad hoc committee to perhaps identify an on-call, if you will, legal service, and potentially other issues that come up. Does that answer your question, Sonia?
Okay, yeah, it makes me curious. I will support this motion.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? Very good. Andrew, would you please call the roll for a vote?
Thank you. Commissioner Inman,
Since firefighters are making progress. this
Commissioner Brown,
Aye.
Massive fire.
Commissioner DeStahl,
It's broken.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
aye.
Commissioner Larson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Krugliak,
Aye.
Co-Vice Chair Garcia,
Aye.
Chair Bain,
Aye.
Commissioner Pons,
Aye.
Commissioner Russ,
Aye.
Co-Vice Chair Katerina,
Aye.
Commissioner Diaz.
Aye.
That motion passes with all commissioners who are present voting aye.
Very good. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, commissioners. So we turn to agenda item 6, update on general counsel services. Commissioners were provided today with a 4th amendment to council's contract regarding general counsel services, which was needed due to council's ongoing and unexpected work this month in January. I'll explain that context in just a moment, then follow our usual process to take requests from the public to speak on this agenda item, followed by clarifying questions and comments from commissioners. And then, as just moved, we'll return to agenda item 5.3. I want to emphasize 2 points, though, from the beginning. First, in this amendment, there is no need to request additional funding, but only to reallocate funds within the existing contract. And second, as has just been described, that the amendment is extending those services only through January 31st, 2022. I'll note that will impact timing for and services for additional IRC activities, again, as just described. So what's the context for this amendment? As commissioners know, we discussed at our last meeting possible activities in January that could require council services. I described some of that earlier, but let me be very explicit here. Those possible activities included such matters as the technical changes to the redistricting plan and final report, item 4 on today's agenda, and support for today's meeting that we had talked about last month. While some of these tasks were discussed at that last meeting, I don't know that any of us realized their potential and actual unanticipated complexities, such as those we discussed during the technical changes. There were those additional complexities had ripple effects on general counsel services for other tasks, such as Public Records Act requests that were received through public input. All these developments occurred as Council's contract reached both its current end date of December 31st, 2021, and its cap on general counsel services of $390,000. While there were still funds that could be reallocated within Council's contract, there was no way to contract with or pay Council for these services in January without a contract amendment. The amendment put in place in order to conduct today's meeting provided for ongoing work in January and authorized reallocation of some of the unspent funds available under the contract, specifically an amount of $25,490 for Special Voting Rights Act Council services. I'd be happy to discuss the topic in a little further detail, or more appropriately say, to have some more discussion and clarifying questions and comments. But first, as an agenda item, let me ask Andrew if there are any requests from the public to speak on this item.
Thank you, Chair Boehm. We did not receive any requests from the public to speak on this item. However, I would like to give any members of the public that are participating a moment to raise their virtual hand if they would like to speak to the commission. Chair Boehm, not seeing any virtual hands raised. That concludes public testimony on this item.
So we turn to clarifying questions or comments from commissioners. Commissioner Diaz.
My only question is, why wasn't this brought before the commission at an earlier date? And I say that because it makes references to retroactive payments and for services.
It's a good question. Frankly, the ripple effects that I described, as well as the nature of the technical changes, were starting to emerge in late December. I only was informed of and understood the changes on December 30th, or the contractual implications of it. And obviously having a meeting on December 30th or 31st would have been either impossible to meet public notification requirements or extremely difficult because we didn't know at that point what was going to be required in January. You'll recall again that our original plan was for one meeting in January. I think now we already know, and based on tonight's discussion, I'm not sure how much more we will have. We are now talking about a potentially even more expansive ad hoc. So there are a number of issues. To be honest, I looked at the situation, not having meetings available. I had to make a call on whether to summon the commission or not, and decided the reallocation of existing funds was the simplest, most efficient way forward.
I think it's also important to note that any amendments to legal contracts need to be vetted in a public process. And so I actually do agree that I like the fact that we're bringing this up, but there's also reference to previous contract amendments that I'm not even sure the public really knew about. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Commissioner Larson.
Yes, I guess I question what funds are still available for this purpose? And are they buried somewhere in the budget? Was this funds previously allocated that haven't otherwise been spent? And finally, how much money will be left in our budget to cover unanticipated expenses beyond the 1st of February? Meetings or anything else? We still have a lot of the fiscal year to go through.
Thank you for that. I will ask staff to weigh in on remaining budget items to the extent we know them today in just a moment. But Commissioner Larson, they're very valid questions. First of all, as I said, the money that was reallocated under this amendment were funds remaining from the Special Voting Rights Act Council budget that was left, a maximum of $25,490. That money under this amendment is only available for use in January. As stated in the amendment and clear, I think, in the contract, there is no contract in place beyond January 31st. We can, I want to be very careful here and may need to get counsel's advice. I'm honestly not sure how much we can talk about any action tonight for services past January 31st. We can certainly add that as an action item for our next meeting, and we can certainly have a discussion about it with regard to what we might be doing after January 31st. I hope that answered the question.
Well, I think we want to have some money available.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I should say, the problem isn't, from my perspective, money available. I think we have actually a fair amount of remaining funds in general, and I'll ask Barbara to provide whatever update we can, although we'll have a monthly budget update in our next meeting. The challenge that we may have, particularly in case we need to meet after January 31st, is that we currently do not have any contract for any counsel services, general counsel services or expert counsel services beyond January 31st. So it's a contractual challenge that we're going to need to deal with. The funding, let me turn now, actually. Barbara, do you want to provide what we can say about overall funding left?
Sure. So we have $394,000 unspent in the IRC budget as of January 5th. Just a reminder, though, we do still have invoices coming in. So we haven't closed out all the invoices from our contractors. And if I may add, Chair, part of the process of the last meeting, the intent is to do a closeout of all the invoices received and actually do a budget update for all of you.
So we'll certainly have that meeting for our next meeting in
Correct.
January. But in all fairness, commissioners, we're asking Flow Analytics to do work that was only approved and tasked tonight. So I think we're going to have to see. Now, I don't think any of these amounts are going to be much. And I do think a good lesson learned is that despite all the pressures, we still have almost 400,000 left. And while I know we all want to be good stewards of public money, I think there is sufficient money there for us to deploy, if we so choose, beyond January 31st in order to accomplish some of the things we're talking about. But there are certain challenges involved in that, and we certainly need to have a discussion, which I would advise we need to do under an action item at our next meeting, on what funds we want to reserve, at least for now, and what funds we think could be returned at this point. Commissioner Larson, does that answer?
Well, I guess my concern is that I want to make sure we do have reserves. This proposed Fourth Amendment, I'm not sure how much money is involved, but I don't want to see everything going to this, plus the work we've given to Flow Analytics, which they deserve. They've done a great job, but that may sap all of our cash. And that still gives us many months of work, possibly, that's not funded for any support. So
Right,
that's a real concern.
Right, but let me be perfectly clear on that point. The only money that's been reallocated, the only money available for spending on general counsel services is $25,490 to be spent in January. There is also a certain amount, I believe, I apologize because I don't have it written down in front of me. Barbara, you may know, for expert counsel services, I think the remainder, which would be applied to lessons learned.
It's
Barbara, do you have that?
closely, I'm at 7,000 to 8,000, no more than 8,000, if I'm recalling correctly. I'm bringing it up right now.
Yeah.
We weren't anticipating doing the, so let me see, 8,271.
Okay. So if you do some quick math on that, we're getting in the neighborhood of 25 plus 8, around 34,000 available for expenses in January under council contract. But there's a total of 394,000 available to the commission in its current budget. Okay.
Were there retroactive expenditures in the previous calendar year that have not been funded yet for council?
I think we're still receiving invoices, at least for December. Barbara, do I have that correct?
Correct. We've received invoices for October, November, and December that were currently processed. So those are already in the projected. And so those have been accounted for, Commissioner Larson. And just to, again, share, the amounts that are being discussed were already in the approved amount. This is not above and beyond. This was already, it was moving it from the VRA into the general counsel, but it's still in the same bucket. It's not above and beyond.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know who had their hand up first. I think it was Co-Vice Chair Garcia and then Co-Vice Chair Katarina, or do I have the order wrong?
No, that's correct. And I thought Commissioner Dostal had her hand up, but maybe she put it down. I'd like to respond to Commissioner Diaz and let her know that trying to decide what I want to say here. I was also surprised. I just learned of this situation this past Friday. That we did not have general counsel services any longer. I thought in our last amendment, we were going to cover ourselves through the end of the mapping process and through the referendum period. But apparently we did not. And so I didn't maybe follow that very carefully when the contract was being amended. I want you to know that the reason that we're raising this issue tonight is because I was one of the people who insisted that it be brought to the commission openly and transparently, that this amendment was being made. And we could not have had this meeting we would have had this meeting, if we would have had the meeting today, it would have been without general counsel if we had not amended the contract. So I did agree. I did say, well, we have to amend the contract. We have no choice if we're going to have this meeting today. And that's what happened. But what the commission needs to know is that it is within their, one other digression perhaps, is that I mentioned in my comments about lessons learned is that we need clarity on policy and procedure with respect to all manner of things, including how things like contractual amendments get made, who has the authority to approve them. Right now it's implicit because it's not explicitly laid out. It's implicit that the officers can approve those, and especially because there's no new expenditure of funding. This is just moving money around. We have approved a budget that had a cap for legal services of $520,000. We're not exceeding that cap. We will exhaust almost all of that money, but we're not spending new money. So I just want to make that point. I pointed that out. We need explicit policies and procedures in place so that it's clear how these things should happen. The point I wanted to make, a very long roundabout, sorry about that, way, is that the commission has the full authority to voice their opinion tonight that they want to terminate the contract. And we would start over, which is why I think, don't want to speak for Co-Vice Chair Katerina, but which is why I think she was moving that action item to after this discussion. And that's what I wanted. Those are the points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Co-Vice Chair Katerina, then Commissioner Dostal, then Commissioner Larson.
So I would like to defer to after that my fellow commissioners have a chance to speak.
I want to be careful of not having a conversation among just 4 commissioners unless there's sufficient interest in that. So I'd rather keep moving, but we'll come back. Commissioner Dostal.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to Rosette, Vice Chair Katerina's, Garcia's comment about, that you felt it was necessary to have the contract in place for tonight. I would just say I agree with that. I think it's not a good idea to have our meetings without counsel. And so I think that was definitely the right decision. So I just wanted to say that. And secondly, I think given that we do have counsel for 1 more month, I think it is helpful that we're having this discussion now, because I don't think we should be extending our meetings beyond once our work is done, meaning the maps. So I think, I really appreciate all the enthusiasm for doing the lessons learned. I think it's important, but I wouldn't agree with extending this out, especially in light of the fact that we only have counsel through the end of the month. And so I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you very much. Just to update, Commissioner Larson, then Co-Vice Chair Katerina, then Commissioner Russ. Commissioner Larson.
I don't have anything further to say.
Thank you. Co-Vice Chair Katerina.
Oh, thank you. So, my issue, as I discussed in the last agenda item, was I want to be able to provide and prepare the next commission. And I do believe that we should provide them with counsel. And it doesn't mean we have to have a contract, but we need to give them an option to start a meeting with an interim counsel so that they can then decide what is the next best step. And we were provided with another counsel to choose when we chose our expert counsel. And I would suggest that might be a good place to start, because they've already been vetted, and county has a working relationship with them as well. It is not a possibility to amend our existing contract again. And I don't believe we should. But I think we do need to have some kind of interim counsel for the next commission. And by the way, I love you guys. It has been a pleasure to work with all of you. I hope we don't have to come back and have a meeting, but the reality is we really don't know what's going to happen in February or March or November. And if something does happen, we need to have a way to have a meeting. And county council has said they will not be our general counsel. Our existing council will not do another amendment. So we need another solution. And I believe that should be part of the motion for discussion in lessons learned and next steps ad hoc. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you for your time and attention.
Okay, thank you. So Commissioner Russ, then Commissioner Chen.
Let me see if I understand this. We're not looking for new money. We're just changing the buckets in the budget from one bucket to another is what I understand. And also, it appears to me that the county has already agreed to this as I see that the chief deputy, Rachel Witt, has already signed this amendment. So I'm not sure what action it is that we need to take. And I do agree with Commissioner Dossel that, no, we need to be represented anytime we meet. I think we need to have counsel. And of course, who knows what's going to happen in February, March, April, when and if any suits start to arise. So, but as I understand it, it's really not new money. It's changing the buckets. And I'm not sure that there's anything that, since it's already been agreed to by the chief deputy of the county, I'm not sure what our action is, unless this is just informational.
Well, on the one hand, it's an informational, thank you for that. On the one hand, it's an informational agenda item. On the other hand, I think the co-vice chairs in particular, but others as well, have noted there are other possibilities down here. And when we return to the lessons learned discussion, I do want to pick up on some of the discussion we've already had. I do see value in this commission finding a way forward to communicate, whether it's in the lessons learned report or maybe in some other channel, to the legislature, some points on timeline and deadlines, frankly, because there is I think, an active question to consider: should there be another census delay? It's a little off this topic, but I wanted to be clear. There are a couple of different possible actions that could pop up after January 31st. I want to be, for myself as chair, a little careful with that, because I don't want the discussion to be uninformed. I do hear commissioners expressing real keen interest in that. And I think that makes it all the more useful that we can have the meeting, as Commissioner Dostal and others have said, later in January, where we can map that out a little bit. And I think Co-Vice Chair Katarina raises a very good point, that without prejudging things or taking too long a meeting tonight, we can still discuss these matters as part of that ad hoc committee and all the advantages that go with it, as well as a fulsome discussion when we have the actual conversation. Commissioner Chen, thank you for your patience.
No problem. So Commissioner Katarina, do I understand correctly? You were saying we should have interim counsel for the next commission, which is 9 years away now. Are you thinking that we would have counsel on board for the next 9 years?
Well, I wouldn't say we pay them. I say we select a firm to represent on an interim basis the next council. You may recall that our council was involved in the prior commission 10 years earlier.
Okay.
And it does seem that these firms have a specialty and they stick around. I am not suggesting we pay them a fee. I am suggesting we have an arrangement so that if we need someone, we can call and we would then pay them whatever the rate is for that meeting. I don't think we're going to need it, I'll be honest, but until the end. But these are, and again, this is just my suggestion. It's quite possible that if we decide to set up an ad hoc committee, that is not what ends up happening. So I am just putting it out there as a suggestion.
Thank you. And so what we're voting on, what this topic of discussion is now, is just for the extension, which is moving money that already exists under budget and approving through the end of January. And that's all we're doing with this topic, correct?
With this agenda item, yes. But
Yes.
after this agenda item is done, we return to the lessons learned comment.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Good. Okay. Co-Vice Chair Garcia and then Commissioner Ponce.
Yeah, I just want to clarify for Commissioner Chen, that decision's already been made, Commissioner Chen. We've already amended the contract and there is no approval required by the commission at this point. This is just an information.
Easier. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Ponce.
Yeah, I just need to understand there was a can't and a won't in the discussion. And that is that county can't support us with legal advice and support, and special counsel won't continue after January, the end of January. Is that correct?
Well, let me first turn to Barbara, because I think she's got the exact wording from County Council.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the County Council Services has indicated that to maintain the separateness of the commission's work, the County Council Office has recused itself from providing legal services to the commission.
And to the second question of won't.
And the
for the
second
existing
question
special counsel.
isn't so much a won't as that there is no contract.
No, the
There-
words won't. No, I got it. But the words won't, will not, those words were used. So I just need to understand is that the existing special counsel, are they in agreement to extend beyond January if necessary?
No, it's not been really discussed yet.
Okay.
And while I'd be happy to give the floor to Marguerite to respond if she's so inclined, I would say it's more a decision first for us to further consider either tonight or ahead of and at our next meeting what we think is needed. Now, there is a litigation possibility there that's a little separate because that's always been, as we've discussed, I think several times before, something that would require some separate action should it become necessary. But since there's nothing indicating such litigation at this point, there's really not much to discuss on that. But the question of council services beyond January 31st is a discussion that this commission would need to have.
I'd like to have that discussion because if special counsel is not there after January, that could be very problematic because it goes into the issue of relationships and an understanding of what we have done, who we are, and what we may have to do going forward. Thank you.
At this point, though, our current general counsel, the current firm, Marguerite's firm, providing general counsel services and expert counsel services will be at our second meeting and providing those services. They are funded and under this amendment are available.
And that second meeting is in January, correct?
Correct.
I am really focused on beyond January. So can we hear from special counsel tonight?
Not really because of the limitations of the agenda, but I think the officers would agree that's something we really need to have, I think, better prepared, both in what the options might be and to see what the commission may want to do after January 31st.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Very good. Thank you, commissioners. Andrew, do we need to revote, or because of the nature of the motion, I think we automatically return to 5.3 at this point, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Co-Vice Chair Katarina, if I may be so bold, we had prepared a motion in advance, but since you were making those points, I'm wondering if there's wording that you'd either want to suggest or provide, whatever's the fastest way to it.
Well, I think that the general concept that I would like to propose is similar to what we have. We have a draft prepared, but I would like to expand it to be more specific so that we can address what I think are going to be some of the outcomes of the ad hoc committee if we do decide to form one. And I say that because I can't predetermine what the ad hoc committee is going to decide. And so, but I want to also give us enough leeway in the structure of the ad hoc so that if the ad hoc does decide to, for example, make a relationship with a legal firm to provide any general counsel services that might be needed, that could be done. And the way the current motion was worded was very narrow. So what I'm suggesting is we expand it. I did send a draft over to Barbara. If you'd like, I can read it, or I could. You want to put it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead and bring it up. Give me 1 minute.
And this is just a starting point. But I would suggest that we create an ad hoc committee to conduct next steps related to the lessons learned discussion. And point number 1 is to finalize the lessons learned report, and that includes organizing responses, identifying common themes, and draft an executive summary of the results. I would then further suggest, as identified in the lessons learned discussion, that we establish, and I'm going to just in hyphens say on-call general counsel for 2022 and beyond. And 3, the third bullet, again, this is a suggestion, would be to, as identified in the lessons learned discussion, establish a transition team or advisory group to finalize finances, manage any ongoing issues, and assist the 2030 IRC as needed. It's a lot, I know.
Before we take the slide down, I've got a feeling we have to make at least one change in item 3, which would be something like consider establishment of, because of course an ad hoc committee can't actually establish anything.
That would go for item 2 also, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I think actually looking back, we may need to do it at the beginning, because it would be to create an ad hoc committee to formulate and recommend or something like that. Maybe just recommend is easier. Counsel, I'm going to ask you to weigh in just a moment on the language for this. And take out the word conduct, right? Okay. And I would say related to lessons learned discussions and inputs. Now, Co-Vice Chair Katerina and others, I'm doing this just trying to capture what we've already discussed. So we've got it, but the point of that, commissioners, would be to make sure we're not just empowering the ad hoc to look at what we discussed tonight, but also look at all the written comments that came in, at all of them. And again, we don't have to necessarily take that much action on any of this tonight. I think we've already had a pretty good discussion, and I am noting the time. I think we ought to be explicit, to pick up on Co-Vice Chair Garcia's words. I think item 1 is probably okay. Again, I'll turn to counsel in just a moment, but item 2, well, actually, let me stop there. First of all, Co-Vice Chair Katerina, is that still on track with what you're proposing?
Yes, that's acceptable. I would also ask counsel and or staff to advise us whether or not we need to report back to the full IRC, or how we wrap up the process for the ad hoc.
Right. Now, let me just point out what I had anticipated in this before we turn to staff and counsel and Co-Vice Chair Garcia. I had been, in looking at calendars and thinking about the work, I was headed towards proposing a meeting on January 27th, which still allows some time in case there are any other, or I'm sorry, on Wednesday, the 26th, which would allow some time for final work in January should it be needed. But I very much want to ask counsel and staff for what they assess to be the nature of the work at this point. All right, before I turn to that, I've got requests from Co-Vice Chair Garcia and Commissioner Hanson. I'd like to take both of them and then turn to staff and counsel. Without objection, Co-Vice Chair Garcia.
Yeah, minor points, finalized lessons learned report. Maybe it's not finalized, maybe it's just, I don't know.
How about draft?
Executive
Draft?
summary?
Because I think, yeah,
I'm sorry.
because it's going to come back to the IRC basically to finalize and approve.
Again, commissioners, the ad hoc committee by itself can only propose things to the full commission. So that's what that's one of the things, and would probably be the heart of the discussion on the 26th or whenever we next meet.
So maybe it's complete lessons learned report.
Very good. Commissioner Henson.
Your number one is to complete lessons learned, but then number two, starting after results, should be to investigate the possibilities of, and then one, no,
You mean farther down in sub
I
two?
mean, but in between results and number two,
Okay. So draft an executive summary of the results.
and then, and number two, I mean, Arabic new two, not, no,
You want a full number two or?
numeral number two should be, no, yeah, should be investigate the possibilities of, and then add that under, up here under Roman numeral 1. You see what I'm saying? Your first job is to complete the lessons learned report, and the second one is to investigate things that we can't make a decision, like calling a general counsel or setting up something to assist the IRC in 2030. Those are investigations of possible later things after you complete the work of this commission.
Okay, staff, could I ask you to change the small I, double I, and 3I to A, B, and C?
I don't think that's what she's saying. I think she's saying that
I understand.
the two IIs was actually,
They had nothing to do with completing the lessons learned report.
Right.
They were something different, which is to investigate further work, as in establish an on-call general counsel and advisory group.
So in effect, move B and C under 2.
Yes.
And that's what I was trying to get at, just to
So,
make it a
yeah,
little clearer.
so,
Because
So-
in an outline, completing the lessons learned is one thing, but then these other things have nothing to do with that. They have to do
well,
with something else.
if I may, Chair Bame.
Please.
We are, and council can certainly weigh in on this, but we are looking at a motion that fits within the agenda item itself. And the agenda item itself is related to lessons learned. And so that is why I want to keep them all together.
Well, then then you could say, as a result of the completed report, comma, investigate the possibility of.
Actually, it already says that. It says as
Okay.
identified and lessons learned.
All right, let me
It's-
ask that we pause there. Let me turn to council first, because I think the theme is becoming clearer here on what is doable under this motion in this agenda item. Marguerite, do you have any comments?
Yes. There was one of the lessons learned will lead to recommendations or suggestions or alternatives for legal support and mentoring for a future commission. The lessons learned were many of them, I read them all, concerned mentoring and preservation of the experience of this commission and passing it on. So I think that making recommendations for how that can occur on all levels with a mentoring group, as has been proposed, and ways to support the commission legally would be appropriate under the motion. It would be part of the report, part of the lessons learned. For example, one of the lessons learned is that there's a one of the mentions was there's a tail of legal work, a tail of work generally that has to be done. So this, it fits in comfortably with it.
Thank you for that. Before we move on, Barbara, anything from staff on this at this point? I'm kind of assuming not.
No, for the process, I'm happy to answer any questions and provide some dates based on the 126 potential next meeting.
Right, but let's formulate the motion, get that resolved so we know what we're talking about, then I'd be happy to turn to you. Okay,
Chair, I was trying to look at what the format is for an outline. And in number 1, any subtopic A, B, C should be an example of what it will take to complete the lessons learned.
right,
But then there is another process that says investigate possible further work or something like that, which would be other things like general counsel and transition team. So when you're building an outline, the whole structure of it is to identify what is the general idea and then what are the subtopics. And if you go from number 1 to B, you see that B is not an example of something you will do in order to complete number 1.
okay, let me take Commissioner Chen, then Co-Vice Chair Garcia, and then come back to council.
Along those same lines, I guess, I'm not in favor of BRC because, we have a lot of lessons learned. I'd like to have the ad hoc committee look at all the lessons learned and decide what it is we want to take action on or need to take it. And I think B and C kind of predetermine or pre-select the ad hoc committee's conclusions, and I'd rather not do that.
That's right. It's what B and C are talking about action that would be taken after the lesson learned is completed. That's a separate activity. It's a separate.
Well, and I'm fine with that as long as it just says investigate the possibility of other actions that need to be taken, rather than specifying general counsel for 2022, advisory group.
That's a good point.
We're picking out specific lessons learned and kind of doing the ad hoc committee's conclusions before they even get to work.
I agree with you there.
Okay, before we move on, I'm uncomfortable having this discussion to formulate a motion. The usual process would be to have a motion and then talk about amendments to it. So we can. All right, I've got several commissioners requesting the floor, and I'm trying to consider what's the most effective, efficient way to discuss all this. Do we want to continue discussing this language, or do we want to get, the way I would normally call it at this point would be to get a motion that is agreeable or at least not immediately objectionable, get that on the floor, and then consider friendly or, if necessary, unfriendly amendments to work from there so that we at least have a starting point. Is that acceptable?
May I say something, Chair Bay?
Yep, please.
Okay. First, I'm, the rationale for having all of these points, and we have done this with other ad hoc committees before, is to make sure that we give the ad hoc committee the direction that they need. And frankly, we may not be able to wait until the next meeting to make the next motion. And then we have to have another meeting in February.
Okay,
So-
before we go on
that's my
Okay,
rationale.
right. And I think that's understood. The question is how much we're going to form into the motion. All right, let me take Commissioner Dostal, then Commissioner Chen, then Counsel. Commissioner Dostal.
Thanks. I was wondering if we should see what the original motion was going to be.
I was actually going to head in that direction. Hold on that for a moment. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, so I think a nice place to start would be 1 and 2. Skip A, B, and C and just start with 1 and 2. Lessons learned report, possibility of actions to be taken, and then add from there,
Okay.
if necessary.
Counsel, any comments on that?
I like the generality of it because I think there is a legitimacy to prejudging the report. Although the themes that we're talking about are in the comments, but I like the generality of that better. It's, I think, a more empowering or authorizing motion.
i.e. just 1 and 2 without listing A, B, and C.
Yes.
Okay, so that's council's advice. Commissioner Hanson?
My suggestion would be to save the A, B, and C and get rid of the 1 and 2. And say, you want to organize responses to the lessons learned report. You want to identify lesson learned, or establish a general, consider, whatever. And, well, no, you're right. You're assuming certain things are in the lessons learned report that we don't know.
Right.
And I would point out, and I'll ask council to confirm, just because it's not listed as a specific tasking doesn't mean it can't be done. It just leaves the option open for the ad hoc committee.
But then I've been on an ad hoc committee where we've made suggestions like that, and it comes back and says, but wait a minute, that's not in your, the motion that formed you. You can't
Right.
do
And
that.
that's why Commissioner Hanson, I'm asking council right now to make sure that this wouldn't necessarily be limiting, because I would certainly, in a chair role, say all these themes are fair game for the ad hoc committee. And if it chooses to so recommend, it can be included. If the ad hoc committee does not so recommend, that doesn't preclude a commissioner from bringing it up at the meeting. It just becomes a little easier if it's been discussed in an ad hoc committee.
True.
Marguerite, any comments on that?
Well, my comment is if we leave it to 1 and 2, the authority is broad. So under 2, investigate the possibility of other actions that need to be taken. Those other actions could include on-call counsel, could include staff. You know, what is the situation with staff? Do you need an executive director? Could include the advisory or the mentoring committee. In other words, it's broad and could flow naturally from the lessons learned without prejudging it. As B is framed now, it's limited to general counsel.
Fair point. Thank you for that. Okay. Co-Vice Chair Garcia, Commissioner Dostal, Commissioner Hanson. Rosette, please.
I'm putting mine down.
Consider under item 2, investigate the possibility of other actions that need to be taken for and recommend to the IRC, for recommendation to the IRC.
Commissioner Dostal. Thank you for that, by the way. Sorry, Commissioner Dostal.
Yeah, I guess I had a similar, that kind of gets to what I was getting at, which was that need. Can we just do recommendations of other, recommended actions? I don't know, just the need bothers me because that also seems like, you know what I mean, limiting, like only things we need to take.
Right.
You're saying
Like, there's not
investigate the
yet-
possibility of other recommendations or other recommended actions?
Other
Or
recommended
just make
actions.
recommendations, make recommendations for other actions that need to be taken.
Well, it was the need to be
Investigate
taken that I was,
possibility.
Okay,
the need to be taken was what I was just didn't like. Because again, if it's not necessary, then it seems like we're not allowing them to do that, just as a way to not limit it, like just other recommendations.
Might be taken.
okay.
And investigate possibility really doesn't make any sense. Just say, make recommendations for other actions to be taken. Or for other actions. Make recommendations for other actions to the IRC.
Make recommendations for other actions. Did I hear correctly?
Yeah,
To
Yeah,
be
based
taken-
on lessons learned. Make recommendations for other actions based on lessons learned, period.
Right. Okay, good, because it'll be to the IRC. We're not recommending it to anybody else. All right,
so scratch A, B, and C, right?
Mhm.
And then we'll vote on that.
No, we don't even have a motion on the floor just at the moment.
I mean, then we'll make that's, but the motion would be based on 1 and 2 without A, B, and C.
Okay, now let me turn to Co-Vice Chair Katerina because she formulated the original motion. Amy, go ahead.
I am very uncomfortable, I'm sorry, not putting that information in there because of exactly what Barbara Hanson said. I've been on enough ad hoc committees to know.
Okay, so we really need to move from general to specific in considering this though. So I'm going to ask staff to save A, B, and C, but have the motion as just 1 and 2 for now. I'm going to turn to Commissioner Dostal, and then I'm going to ask for this motion to be made so that we can discuss whether, and if so, how much to add from A, B, and C to the motion itself. Lydia, please.
Sorry, it was a leftover hand.
Great, thank you. All right, so the motion I'm asking for consideration of is on the left of the screen: to create an HC to recommend next steps related to lesson learned, discussion, and inputs with 1 and 2.
So
Is that
moved.
motion on the floor from Commissioner Chen? Thank you. Second,
A second.
Commissioner Dostal, thank you. Okay. Now we turn to discussion. Commissioner Hanson or Co-Vice Chair Katerina, given the discussion that just happened, is there a way you can see suggesting A, B, or C? I don't know what happened to A. Was it, there we go. Is there a way to move those in a way that would sound consistent with the discussion we just had?
My
Other than-
comment is that I like it the way it is with just 1 and 2 and let the committee come to their own conclusions.
Okay, thank you for that.
I also am comfortable moving forward with 1 and 2, but I will tell you now, if it comes back and we get in trouble for this, I'm going to say I told you so.
No, I'm going to resist that. Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Diaz.
I agree with Commissioner Katerina. Having served on previous ad hoc committees, we really need to be clear on what those responsibilities are for the ad hoc, what deliverables they're responsible for. So that's my 2 cents.
I appreciate that. I would suggest we're in a slightly different mode right now, because without approval of ABC or any other recommendations, nothing happens beyond beyond frankly 1, beyond the actual report. It will take a commission decision, which obviously we can't do tonight because we don't know what that decision will be, on exactly, to put it bluntly, how proactive and active we're going to be after January 31st. Now, all that said, I will offer the commission a good faith commitment that we can bring up either other discussions that came in the ad hoc committee but didn't make it into its recommendation, or other actions that may be thought of after tonight's meeting. There's a lot to consider here, and commissioners do not yet have the benefit of staff's report or counsel's advice on what we do need to wrap up and do. At a very simple level, do we keep our computers past February 1st or not? And if so, how long? And what are the costs involved? I'm hoping we'll have some advice and answer on that, but we'll be discussing that, I'm sure, in some form. So I don't want to say this ad hoc is going to be the be all end all of everything that happens after January 31st. We will do all we can to have the right kind of agenda to allow discussion of other items. But I do think there's solid commission support, unquestioned, frankly, for a lessons learned report in the form of what might otherwise be called an executive summary. That would be something highlighting, as I mentioned earlier, the most, or highlighting lessons learned to be recommended to the commission as seems to be captured in the report and discussions and approved by the commission before they move forward. So I'd like to keep that as a concrete step and then we will figure out how to deal with the others. But Commissioner Diaz, Co-Vice Chair Katerina, I want to promise you I will fight to not have an I told you so moment. I will make a good faith effort on that. Commissioner Larson, and then I really do want to move to a vote soon because I want to respect people's time.
Okay, well, I think we need those three letter points at the bottom. A belongs with 1 and B and C belongs with 2. And I do it this way. I'd make a second sentence in number 1. And then in number 2, comma, for example, colon, and then put in that B and C.
While commissioners consider that and see it, let me ask counsel, any comment on that?
My understanding of Commissioner Larson's comment that they would be examples and not really prejudge what the report would say. So there are more examples. Make recommendations for other actions based on lessons learned, such as.
For yeah, or for
For
example.
example, yeah,
Yes.
something like that. That doesn't necessarily prejudge.
Well, I would disagree. I say if the reason we're bringing them out as examples kind of does prejudge.
Yeah.
Well, again, because this was a motion in its original formulation, Commissioner Larson is in effect proposing an amendment to the motion. The first step would be to see if the mover and the seconder would agree to it. Commissioner Larson, first of all, does that reflect your intent as written on the screen?
Well, I suggested in number 1, put a period after commission approval and then make A the next sentence. Okay, and then in 2, after lessons learned, it's comma, for example, colon. Having served on several ad hoc committees, yes, we do need direction, but on the other hand, we don't have to follow everything. We can choose not to do something.
Commissioner Chen, I thank you for that. Commissioner Chen, is that acceptable as a friendly amendment?
No.
Okay. Could I suggest, just to save time, after, for example, sorry, keep that up there. Yeah. After, for example, comma, but without limiting to, comma, the following issues or something like that. In other words, Commissioner Chen, being very explicit that while these ideas are brought out and the commission expects the ad hoc to discuss them, the ad hoc is not bound to focus solely on them. Now, that wording needs to be played with a little bit, but I hope I'm trying to bridge the two.
It still seems to me that it prejudges and biases the work of the committee. I think the committee has access to the notes of this meeting. The committee certainly will know everything that's been discussed here tonight, and I don't think it needs to be in the motion.
Very good. Okay, so please take out what I just said. Go back to, for example, good. Commissioner Larson?
Well, I stand with what I said.
Okay, so
I think,
Commissioner
if I
Dustin?
may, Commissioner Chair, what if we say on lessons learned, which may but need not include? That way it addresses Katerina's concern, but also addresses Chen's concern, which is
There were
it
many,
doesn't,
many lessons learned. Why bring out these particular points?
because I think Commissioner Katerina wants to include them, and I'm not opposed to including them if they agree, but it doesn't have to include them.
Well,
So
that's why I mean, I would rather leave it up to the ad hoc committee to make those decisions rather than give them any kind of bias going into the work.
All right.
Understanding that we may get, and I told you so from Commissioner Katerina. I understand.
I want to be clear that I think the points have been made. What I would propose at this point is to move to an unfriendly amendment and vote as proposed by Commissioner Larson. But I don't want to cut off discussion. As always, I am paying close attention to the time. I have Commissioner Larson, Commissioner Dostal, Co-Vice Chair Katerina. Commissioner Larson?
Oh, I agree with Commissioner Dostal, and I think if we change those words, that would be a friendly change to an unfriendly amendment.
Commissioner Dostal, was that an old hand? Okay, Co-Vice Chair Katerina?
And I just wanted to, and again, having served on many ad hoc committees, I don't want to put the cart before the horse. If we have to wait for the lessons learned to finish, then we might not be able to get to the other two things. And so I'm a little bit concerned about what does what. I'm okay with the motion either way, but I just want to reiterate that the wording does matter, and sometimes it's better to have more information than less. But I did think we wanted to say, instead of establish, consider. And I don't know what, and that was just something that didn't get changed when we copied things back and forth, because I agree with Commissioner Chen. If it does say establish, then that is predetermining, but consider is not. But again, I'm okay either way, and I'm happy to move on with whatever direction.
I go along with that.
Marguerite, did you want to weigh in on that?
I just a thought. Do you want to change it just to A and B, the first word, instead of as identified, but if identified? Again, a step away from prejudging.
Commissioner Larson, because I'm still on an unfriendly amendment track, is that acceptable?
It's acceptable.
If I could just make a small, sorry.
Please, go ahead.
Which may, but need not include.
Correct. All right. Okay, so where we would be right now, not having any more requests for the floor, would be if Commissioner Chen and Commissioner Dostal were amenable, we could include this as a friendly amendment. If either of them oppose, I would move immediately to vote on the unfriendly amendment, followed by a vote on the motion. Commissioner Chen, are you still in the same position? I don't mean to pressure you in any way. I'm just confirming.
No pressure, but I still think it prejudges to some extent, and I don't think we need to.
Yeah, and it's a good discussion. I appreciate all the inputs. So unless anyone else has the floor, we're going to vote. I'll ask, I know this is a little confusing. Staff, could you try to highlight the amendments as proposed by Commissioner Larson, so we know what the unfriendly amendment looks like?
And you should probably drop the parentheses after results, so there's no parentheses needed there.
Okay, good. So it's in effect, Commissioner Larson, let me clarify with you. It's creating that second sentence in number 1. And it's adding A and B in number 2. Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair.
Okay. And Commissioner Chen, again, without meaning to pressure, I know there's been some other minor wording changes, but since that's the heart of what we're talking about, is that okay to frame it that way as an unfriendly amendment?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So with that, and not seeing any other requests for the floor, I'm going to ask Andrew to call a vote on take the roll call for a vote on the highlighted unfriendly amendment. Andrew,
Thank you.
could you please call the roll?
Certainly, and Chair Bame, just to clarify, under the rules, this would be considered a substitute motion by Commissioner Larson, in which case we still need a second for the substitute motion.
I'm sorry. Very good. Do we have a second for the substitute motion?
I'll second.
Okay. Very good. So Commissioner Dustal. Andrew, as a substitute motion, we're okay for that?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, and I'm sorry for the mischaracterization. It's one of those days. Andrew, would you please call the roll for a vote on this substitute motion?
Thank you, and I will call the vote in random order like in before, starting with Commissioner Larson,
Aye.
Commissioner Russ,
As I said earlier this evening, the real work is done in ad hoc committees. And I hate to limit the degrees of freedom that an ad hoc committee has. I don't think this limits it too much. Therefore, I vote aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Inman, Commissioner Inman,
You hear me?
now I can.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen,
Nay.
Commissioner Pons,
Nay.
Commissioner Diaz,
Aye.
Chair Bame,
Aye.
Commissioner Dostal,
Aye.
Co-Vice Chair Garcia,
Aye.
Co-Vice Chair Katarina,
Aye.
Commissioner Krugliak.
No.
That motion passes with Commissioners Chen, Pons, and Krugliak voting no, all other commissioners who are present voting aye.
Very good. All right, so the motion is, the motion now reads without those highlights, having the substitute motion passed. I'll make one, I'll open the door one time for any additional comments not already made, while reminding commissioners that if this motion is approved, we will then need to appoint members of the ad hoc committee. Commissioner Pons.
Yes, there is no focus to this recommendation. None. I mean, there are 145 lessons learned. The only thing I think that Commissioner Katarina was doing was trying to focus the commission on first things first. And I think we need to prioritize our efforts. And if we don't do that, we're going to find ourselves with no runway and lots of things to do with no time to get them done. The second point I want to make is this, and I'm not going to capitulate, I'm not going to soften this discussion, but I'm about to say, I am very concerned about comments that say that they are confused about the structure of the lessons learned. The lesson learned topic was teed up in July. The call for feedback in September, I received only four constructive comments. Now today, on the 12th of January, there have been concerns expressed out of confusion. I think that is unfair. I think that is unprofessional, and I think it is irresponsible to the process. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And with that, can we have the full motion visible on the screen before we move to a vote?
And Chair Bame, just to clarify for the record, the substitute motion would in effect negated the previous motion that was on the table. So what we have on the screen is no longer in effect since the substitute motion took
Right,
precedent over
right.
that.
So we
Okay.
need the substitute motion on the screen because that's
Right.
now the motion.
Right. Well, that was the motion that the commission took. At this point, it'd be appropriate to appoint members to the ad hoc committee.
All right. Okay, so that's the motion that was approved as a substitute motion. I'm sorry, I see what you're saying. And I apologize, commissioners, for the misstatement. I'm sorry. That's on me. All right. So with that in mind, I'm going to reserve the right on how large this ad hoc committee is going to be, because I want to make sure it's small enough that it can actually meet and get its work done in time for the officers, especially officers not serving on the ad hoc, to be able to review it. I also want to make sure council and staff have a chance to review it and relate it to any other discussions related to wrap up matters such as budget. With that in mind, and I hope commissioners are now familiar with that motion, I'm going to take it down from the screen. Okay. Commissioners, who would be interested in, I'm not going to name to finalize it yet, but who would be interested in serving on the committee, on this ad hoc committee? Commissioner Hanson? Sorry, Commissioner Kugliak, is that a hand to participate or a hand to speak?
Participate.
Okay, Commissioner Kugliak. Commissioner Larson, was that your hand? Okay.
Yes.
Any others? I'm sorry, Co-Vice Chair Katerina, that's a hand, sorry. Yeah, having a little problem seeing there.
If
Barbara?
needed.
I have a consideration for those that are volunteering, if I may, Chair Boehm, in terms of
Please, please, please.
timelines. If they're planning out their next week, a week and a half, in order to allow the officers, council, staff, and get it posted with our agenda and everything, ideally that would be finalized, the report for the 20th of January.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so right now I have a list of Commissioners Hanson, Krugliak, Larson, and Co-Vice Chair Katerina. Any others? Very good. Now I do want to, as we finish this agenda item, we don't have future business or future agenda items on the agenda, but I do want to make sure we've got an understanding of what the timeline is like and at least have an initial survey of what date would work best for next meeting. Co-Vice Chair Garcia.
So I don't know how this would work, but I would be interested in being involved, but I don't want my I don't want my availability to mess up the ad hoc committee.
Okay, we can.
I was going to raise my hand, but then when I heard about the timing, so I'd be happy to participate or to help out or whatever. But I don't want to be a rate limiting step for this committee.
Okay, thank you. Co-Vice Chair Katerina.
Ironically, I am available up until the 20th, but not maybe so much after for a couple of days. So, so the timing works for me, but perhaps the co-chairs could be on, advisory. However you want to handle that, David. You know my issues.
No, yeah, I appreciate that. And I know we've used that model before, but in this case, I want to be very, very careful because I don't want to limit or confuse the process at all. Now, as we transition out of this agenda item, because we need to consider how it's being kept, how it's going to be considered. Let me first ask, are commissioners available for a meeting, I would presume in the evening of Wednesday, January 26th? Okay, that looks to me close enough to a quorum and majority that we would be good. So we'll aim for January 26th, 5:30 again, 5 o'clock. Any preferences? Speak now.
5:30.
5:30 it is. So that'll be the tentative plan. If anything changes in the next, let's say by noon tomorrow, please advise staff because we'll need to kind of count back from there. But to do it briefly, I certainly would want to be able to provide the ad hoc committee's recommendation to commissioners with the idea that they could read it. If we have the initial draft coming forward for council staff review and preparation by the 20th, or let's say the end of the day on the 20th, let me just get a calendar in front of me. That's the Thursday. I think there's a realistic chance we could get it out that weekend, but certainly by the 24th. Now, council's role in this is important as well, because I think the ad hoc is going to need some time to formulate before they could even solicit advice. Marguerite, what time frame would be realistic if the ad hoc committee completed its work on the 20th?
Oh, I'm sorry. Chair
I'm
Boehner, are
sorry.
you saying for legal review?
Yes, if assuming they could get it in your hands, let's say by 5 p.m. on the 20th,
Yeah.
when do you think realistically we could get it, assuming there are no major issues with it, into the hands of commissioners to read?
Well, the budget, okay, this is a special meeting, correct? The
Correct.
26th.
Right. So the agenda
So-
has to be posted by the 25th.
Yeah,
But-
the agenda has to be posted by the 25th, but we want to get something into the hands of the commissioners.
As
And
soon
we
as
can't
possible.
do that under the Brown Act until it's posted. What is sent to a majority of the commissioners has got to be posted.
Right, right. And it would certainly be posted. And for what it's worth, I would be willing to push, and I'm sure the officers would agree, that we could formulate the agenda as early as needed. That won't take a lot of time. Other materials might take a little more time, such as staff's wrap-up report, but those can wait.
Yeah, I think it can be turned around by Monday morning.
Okay. So commissioners, is it acceptable if you receive, and I know the ad hoc committee will do its work as quickly as it possibly can, but if you receive the report on Monday, the morning of Monday, the 24th, will that be sufficient time for a good discussion and possible approval on the 26th? I don't see objection. Okay, so that's the timeline, to try to be explicit about it, that we'll pursue. I'll leave it up to the ad hoc to decide when they want and how they want to meet with staff. I'm sure supporting, and I'm sure being able to assess things along the lines of the motion and the discussion and the materials already provided. So for right now, commissioners, please expect that report the morning of the 24th ahead of a meeting the afternoon, 5:30 on the 26th. Anything else to discuss on that particular agenda item and results of it? Very good. Barbara, do you want to mention briefly something more about the wrap-up report? I'm not even sure that's the right thing to call it, but what else commissioners can expect ahead of the 26th, and then we'll move to adjournment.
Sure. Just really briefly, we'll be putting together sort of, I'm not sure if it's going to be a checklist or just a list of reminders of in terms of turning in laptops, seeking for those of you that may be seeking some initial reimbursement for any of the allowable expenses. We'll send you an email with that information. Anything else that's needed for closing out your email accounts, et cetera. So we'll be sending all of that to you in preparation for closeout.
Thank you for that. And commissioners, I would ask you by a date and time Barbara will set right now, if you have any questions or topics that you want to make sure staff addresses, please email them to staff by, Barbara, when would you like it?
Friday, if possible, but we know some of you might need a little bit more time, so Monday morning is fine.
Okay, so if at all possible. No, we're asking a lot. Thank you for that. Please bear in mind as well, we'll still have to approve resolutions to finalize and wrap up the the technical adjustments that we discussed. Andrew, anything further, please?
Yes, Chair Boehner, just wanted to clarify if the commission wanted to take a formal vote on the appointment of the commissioners to the ad hoc committee.
I was going to return to you on that, and I know that's normal process. So if that's agreeable and if commissioners know, again, Andrew, do you want to read the list as you have it?
Sure, I have the following commissioners would be appointed to the ad hoc committee that was just established. Commissioner Hanson, Commissioner Kugliak, Commissioner Larson, Co-Vice Chair Katerina, and Co-Vice Chair Garcia. And I would just look for a motion and a second
Right.
with that confirmation.
So do I have a motion to appoint those 5 commissioners to the ad hoc committee?
So moved.
Second.
Second, I'm sorry. Second. Commissioner Russ, thank you. Any discussion? Andrew, would you please call the roll for a vote?
Thank you. Commissioner Inman,
Aye.
Commissioner Pons,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown,
Aye.
Co-Vice Chair Garcia,
Aye.
Commissioner Diaz,
Aye.
Co-Vice Chair Katarina,
Aye.
Chair Bain,
Aye.
Commissioner Russ,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Krugliak,
Aye.
Commissioner Dostal,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Larson.
Aye.
That motion passes with all commissioners who are present voting aye.
Thank you very much, commissioners. Sorry, just 1 second. I wanted to make sure. Yeah, all right. So commissioners, just 2 reminders. First of all, I want to be very careful that no one is making any assumptions about the ad hoc committee's work or results, especially given the comments from Commissioner Pons, which I attach importance to, because he has been working very hard, very transparently, and very effectively, in my opinion, on this entire exercise. And I hope commissioners will take his comments with very, very clear attention and thought, because they deserve to be considered that way. Beyond that, I'll remind commissioners that we will now need a vote on that, probably, I hope, a robust discussion. We'll have several issues on wrap up to do. We will need to consider one way or the other what our expectations are for funding counsel and other issues beyond January 31st. I hope and expect that the ad hoc committee will have good recommendations on that, but I want to remind commissioners that is a responsibility for everyone to consider in this meeting that's coming up. Okay. Not seeing any other business, not seeing any other requests for comment. Commissioner Larson, is that a request, please?
Yes. Is Monday a holiday for the county?
Yes,
Barbara
sir,
and
it is.
Andrew are nodding. Yes, it is.
It is.
I believe it is. And
Okay.
before I forget, happy Martin Luther King Day to all. Very good. Okay, so staff, you'll be in touch with the ad hoc to work out logistics, correct?
We're happy to support any logistics or any support that the ad hoc needs.
Thank you very much. And counsel will be available, I'm sure, as well as needed. So that concludes the business before the Independent Redistricting Commission tonight. As we've discussed, please pencil in, and staff will forward at the right moment notification for a meeting, a special meeting of the commission on Wednesday, January 26th at 5:30 p.m. With no further comment, more information again for the county IRC is available on the website, www.drawyourcommunity.com. Thanks again for attending. This meeting is adjourned at 8:59 p.m. Have a good holiday weekend all.
Thank you.
Andrew, thanks again.
Happy to help.
I really appreciate it. Good to see you. Take care all.